Good morning. I am now convening the June 14th, 15th meeting of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Kirsten Barnes, Catherine Williams-Brown, C. Michael Cooney, Lena Darling-Hammond,
Here.
Marisol Escobedo, Jose Gonzalez, Makita Gwino Shire, Alicia Hine, Bonnie Clatt, Kevin Quinn, Monica Martinez, Castle Redmond, Ade Rodriguez, Tina Salone, Christine Zeppos, Michelle Zuma. We have a quorum.
I want to thank you for reminding us that we're supposed to be fully present in mind, body, and spirit at our commission meetings. Commissioner Bonnie Clatt, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 2A is the approval of the April 2018 minutes. We will need to make two separate motions to approve the ad hoc committee and regular session minutes. I would like to remind everyone that only those who served on each committee can make and second the motion to approve the committee minutes. Is it routine that if you were not at the meeting, you should abstain? So do I have a motion from the member of the ad hoc committee to approve the April 2018 ad hoc committee minutes? And if you're wondering if you are on that committee, it's Escobedo, Kung, and Rodriguez Ide. Who? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Both of the members of the ad hoc committee have already done their duty. And is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Okay. All opposed, motion carries. Next, do I have a motion to approve the April 2018 commission minutes? Okay, Commissioner Cooney, and do I have a second? Commissioner Clatt. Any discussion of those minutes? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we have 3 abstentions here for whoever's keeping the record. The motion carries. And the next item is 2B, approval of the June 2018 agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the June 2018 agenda? So moved. Commissioner Gonzalez, thank you. Do I have a second? Okay, Commissioner Escobedo. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Agenda item 2C is approval of the June 2018 consent calendar. Do commissioners have any items they would like to consider in closed session? Yes, Commissioner Barnes.
I know we have a long one, but I have 3. Number 6, Lisa Bartles. Number 7, Anita Michelle Baskin. And number 10, Timothy Bennett.
Thank you. Any other items to consider in closed session, Commissioner Clatt?
Number 44, the last name is Jalbert, Jalbert.
And Commissioner Zumat? Any others? Yes, Commissioner Kung. Okay. It's going to be a rousing closed session today. Do I have a motion to approve all the remaining items on the consent calendar? Commissioner Clatt? And do I have a second? Commissioner Barnes? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And so here we are, really the first meeting of the summer. Many of you are through with your classes and most commencements. As Commissioner Gonzalez just reminded me, there are still budget meetings to be held and LCAP meetings and some things like that. But we're at that moment where we can take a breath, sort of think about what the last school year was like and what's to come. This is an important meeting for us. We've been on a path for a number of years in California to really take a look at our special education system. And we're going to make some decisions in this meeting that are going to be very important in that regard that we've been talking about for quite a while. For those who are new to this topic with us, the State Board of Education and the CTC jointly created a commission, a task force on special education about 4 years ago now, I guess, because outcomes for students who have special education needs in this state have been problematic. Some of the lowest graduation rates in the country, some of the lowest proportions of students served in the mainstream setting, low achievement rates. In the most recent examination of school districts and schools with targeted support and intervention needs, special education was the #1 reason that most schools were identified because of the gap in performance. So the Special Education Task Force took up this task, and one of the things that they concluded after their long study, which was released a couple of years ago now, was that we really needed to create one system of education, that every student is a general education student, and in fact, many students have a range of needs along a continuum, but we had two very segregated and discrete systems. We also, in the commission deliberations, looked at our standards and realized that we were not doing as much as we could do and that some other states are doing to ensure that general education teachers know enough about all of the ways to meet students' needs and that specialist teachers have the knowledge and skill base to meet the needs of students. We had, as a commission many years ago, eliminated the requirement for specialist teachers to have a general education credential. Many of them were coming in without that basis, and in addition, having a very rapid 9-month credential on an intern license that meant they weren't getting student teaching, and were trying to really figure out how to teach significantly on their own. We've had enormous shortages of special education teachers as of this past year. 2 out of every 3 positions for newly hired special education teachers were filled by people who had not completed and often had not started any training for the job. These are our most vulnerable students in California. Many great leaders in our nation have made the point, and in other nations, that it's, the way that we treat the most vulnerable of our citizens that speaks to us about the character of our society. And in that regard, we've not been living up to the aspirations that California has for itself, or that we have for ourselves as educators. We know that as educators, people want the knowledge and skills that they need to have to do a good job. I don't know any teacher who doesn't want to be fully prepared to meet the needs of the students that they teach. So we have 2 important things this day to talk about. One is the good news. Both of them are good news, but one is that we have been talking to the legislature, the governor's office, and so on, about how to ensure that we have incentives to bring people into this field to receive the new and better training that we're designing at this table. And the budget deal has been announced. It will be voted on maybe momentarily, maybe in the next 24 hours. But there is $125 million in that budget deal for incentives to bring people into teaching through local incentives and initiatives and through residency programs. $100 million of that is allocated for special education, so that we have the possibility now of inducing people and supporting people to come into the profession and to receive a stronger preparation. And tomorrow we'll be looking at moving ahead our recommendations for education specialist credentials, which will strengthen the access to knowledge that candidates have as they come into the field. So to me, I think it's a momentous convergence of events. We've often talked about the fact that we can regulate here at the table at CTC what we hope people will learn and be able to do. But we have to still have people who want to be able to and are enabled to access that knowledge. And so that's what really requires two hands clapping. We are one hand, but we don't want to be just one hand clapping and regulating without the supports that are necessary. So at this moment, we have both the supports and the promise of stronger preparation coming together. So we have many other things to attend to at this meeting, but as you can see, I'm personally excited about that one. It's been a long time coming, and I look forward to us really moving the state forward. Mary.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, commissioners, members of our larger community. Happy summer. It's great to see you all today. We are at a good point in our year, and I just want to give you a quick roundup. We finished 36 accreditation visits this past year that were successful and went without a hitch. And our professional services division took the lead on all of that work. Our certification division has gotten our processing time well below the 50-day legal mandate for processing credentials in preparation for the high water mark that comes right as as credential applications begin coming in. We will see, the summer will be very busy with processing, but I'm really pleased with the work that Charlie and his team have been able to do to get us ready for that onslaught. Performance assessment work, both the teaching performance assessment and the administrator performance assessment completed field review this past year, the field test this past year, and we're finished with that part. We're evaluating all of the data that we received from that and revising. Amy Rising and I spend countless hours, night and day, working on just making sure we have these systems really ready to roll for the fall, and that's an exciting moment for us. It'll also be a very busy summer for us. And finally, I'm really quite pleased to be able to tell you that the number of cases that we have pending over at the Attorney General's office has been reduced to about 207 as of this week, which is a little bit smaller than the number that's in the report that Vanessa Whitnell will provide to you later in this meeting. We hit the high water mark at the AG was 311 cases, and that was a significant backlog, and there's been a lot of time and effort and money spent to try and get that under control. We're within about 40 cases of being into a normal workload with the Attorney General work, and that is also a testament to huge, significant collaborative work between our office and between the Attorney General's office. So it's a good moment in our year, and we are very excited also about this meeting. We've got some very important updates to bring and some opportunities to act in ways that are going to be pivotal for the work we do to prepare the workforce. And with that, I'll end my report. Thank you.
Authorized to ask other commissioners to report, but I want to especially ask our Vice Chair, Alicia Hine, who chaired the commission meeting in April and had her baby the next day, to announce her baby.
Thank you. So I didn't even tell you how much pain I was in sitting up here. So yeah, everything was great. And the next morning I went home that night I went home, and the next morning I gave birth to a very healthy baby girl, 8 pounds, 3 ounces. We named her Xenia after my mom, and her middle name is Dean after my husband's middle name. And she's here. I'm not in the building, but she's in Sacramento, so you might have a sighting.
We'd be passing her around the table if she was here.
You might have a baby sighting. She's had me up since 3:30, so see how I do through closed session. No, it was great, so thank you.
Congratulations. Are there any other commissioners who have something to report, which will clearly be not as exciting as that, but don't be daunted by the fact that, I don't know. Do your commissioner report.
I just wanted to, let's see. So the ASCA National Conference, American School Counselor Association Conference, is actually this July in Los Angeles. So if someone hasn't signed up yet, I don't know where you'll stay in a hotel, because they're on the 6th or 7th hotel. But there's plenty of spaces. So it's pretty awesome because it's the national conference. So there's school counselors from all over the country. And I like going because we network, and then there's times where it's, I know this is going to sound awful, but you hear from counselors in other states, and you go, oh, okay, we don't have it as bad. And then you talk to counselors from other states, and you're like, do you have any openings? I want to go there. So that's up and coming. And then just on a personal note, usually I don't say things, but I just want you all to know how special you all are, because I'm actually here spending my 21st wedding anniversary with you all. While my husband is home with the new puppy we just saved. So it was like, ETC, husband, puppy. Okay. So anyway, I'm here and can't wait to get home and see the puppy and my husband. My husband. And the puppy.
You notice the order of operations there. First the puppy. Thank you. Any other commissioners have items to report? Commissioner Gonzalez.
I feel inclined that in the spirit of sharing, I'd like to personally thank everyone here for the wonderful gifts and service you all provide education. Many of us serve in our capacities because education indeed was probably the greatest gift that we received. So thank you for your service. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your commitments.
Any other commissioners want to report? All right, so I think now we'll go to liaisons. Commissioner Barnes.
So I've actually been in Sacramento since Sunday night because the PPS work group met Monday and Tuesday, and it just didn't seem go home and come back. So 2 full days of working, the school social workers, school counselors, school psychologists, each in this room in their own groups. Very dedicated. We got to get a look at the first survey. Some of the feedback, because the survey just went out a few weeks ago, was very informative, very helpful to just get comments from, you could tell from people who aren't doing our everyday job, because sometimes you're in there and you're just so focused. So we got we got some comments, some aha moments, some things that we realized we left out. A lot of revisions. Excited to see when the next surveys come out, the feedback from that, and of course, all the questions from the groups yesterday, well, when does this go forward? When do we start? When is this going to hit? And so, we're not there yet. I believe there's talk of August being some information, but there's just been a lot of work, a lot of updating, and I'm just very thankful to be a part of that group because it's a very needed, necessary update.
Terrific. Commissioner De La Torre Escobedo.
So I'll be reporting for Commissioner Aida Rodriguez, and she says the 2-day Committee on Accreditation meeting in May was rich with activity and discussion. 13 accreditation reports were accepted. On the second day, all 4 institutions reviewed met our standards without concern, and on the first day, only 2 of the 9 satisfied all the requirements. The other 9 institutions elicited varying degrees of concern in some cases, and commendation to others for their commitment to continuous improvement. Speaking of continuous improvement, since these are the first rounds of the review process that have been in design for a couple years now, the committee discussed ways of improving the process to ensure that the students in these programs are receiving the best preparation. The Committee on Accreditation is strong, asking the right questions, and doing exactly what we envisioned in our rich discussions a couple of years ago of giving some teeth to this process so that we get closer to our goal of putting the best prepared teachers in our California classrooms. Another rich discussion that took place was the criteria for identifying exemplary schools. There was some trepidation in using the exemplary label because of the effect that it can have on other schools. I mentioned that rather than serving as inspiration to other programs, it could engender hopelessness because how can some state schools compete with some private schools that use GREs for admission? The students are there full-time and there are many resources available, as opposed to a part-time student population in institutions that are economically strapped. So we talked about, rather than exemplary, highlighting best practices based on accreditation visits and show other schools what said institution is doing remarkably well. Lastly, I really want to acknowledge the Herculean effort demonstrated by the students and staff at Westmont College during their site visit. Their visit coincided with the fires and floods in the Santa Barbara area, and even though they were given the option to postpone, they forged ahead and used the resources available to communicate the great work the institution is doing to prepare their teachers. I think this level of commitment and no matter what attitude is a lesson the students will never forget and will take into the classrooms with them.
Lovely. Thank you. Commissioner Brown.
I'm glad to be back. I missed the last meeting in part because as a community college faculty member, I attended the State Academic Senate or Faculty Senate state conference, and just wanted to report that I'm glad to be back, and they're glad that I'm here because they're very interested in participating in the material that's being looked at around CTE. And really interested in participating in helping educate students into careers in industry. And then secondly, as a member of a college that's working with the initiative at the Chancellor's Office, the State Chancellor's Office around strong workforce development, there's a lot of support from the community colleges in helping, I don't want to use bridge the gap, but helping to put together work that high school students might be doing and helping that guided pathway to move from high school into college. And if that includes the community college system, to be able to help make liaisons and connections there. So that's what I'll be bringing back. I'm back.
Terrific. Commissioner Gonzalez, did you? Okay. I thought I saw another hand. Was there another liaison report? Yes, thank you.
Hi, good morning. I just have something small. I just wanted to say that the cohort that I've been working with, we finished our Credential program in May, so that was really exciting. Thank you. And I just wanted to say one thing that I found really beneficial and I think is worth sharing is a nearby district held mock interviews for us at the SDSU Education Specialist Program. And it was super beneficial to both parties, I feel, because the district and the local principals and then us candidates, we got practice with each other, I guess, right? So the district got to see who we were and we got to practice interviewing. And some of us actually landed jobs out of the mock interviews. And we kind of got some good practice about what to expect in upcoming interviews. So that's all I wanted to say, and I think the reciprocity between the district and the institution was worth sharing. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your service on the commission. We have really benefited from it. Any other liaison reports? All right. I will now recess the general session and move to the Fiscal Policy Planning Committee. Commissioner Barnes, will you please convene the committee?
I now convene the June 2018 meeting of the Fiscal Policy and Planning Committee. The committee has one information item before it today. Item 3A is the update on the governor's proposed 2018-19 budget. Michelle Perrault will present. Ms. Perrault, will you please begin?
Good morning and happy summer. You're lucky. It's been 100 degrees plus the last 2 days. I don't think it's going to be quite that hot. But needless to say, I'm here to provide you an update on the 2018-19 state budget and its impact on the commission. So the governor did release his May revision last month, and the commission's internal budget as it relates to the May revision was largely unchanged from what we saw in January. All three of our budget request proposals were continued to be included in the May revision. Just a reminder what those proposals are. There's an increase of $1.5 million in one-time teacher credentialing funds to provide some expenditure authority for us to digitize all of our teacher credentialing records, the ones that are housed in the 1970s Lectrever down the hall. An increase of $1.275 million in one-time funds from the Test Development and Administration account. This is to support a full-scale field test of the Administrative Performance Assessment that we are rolling out for the 18-19 year. And then an increase of one-time funds of $380,000 also from the Teacher Credentialing Fund, and this is to work on a program that will help us automate our teacher assignment monitoring process that we currently do in a paper-driven manner. So all of those continue to appear in the May revision proposed by the budget or by the governor. following the release of the May revision, the legislature goes into its respective subcommittees. Those took place all during the month of May. And then any items that are heard in their respective houses, in those respective committees, that are not approved or have a difference in their approval go into what we call conference committee. And that conference committee took place all last week. It finished at midnight on Friday. And they took up a few of all of our items that were those 3 budget change request proposals did not have to go to conference, so that was wonderful for us. The one item which Chair Darlene Hammond mentioned that did go to conference was the funding as it relates to addressing the teacher shortage. So as I mentioned last Friday evening, very late, they struck a deal. The legislature did with the governor, and they have until midnight tomorrow, the legislature, to pass the budget. It's anticipated that they'll probably run what we call budget drills today, and we anticipate that it'll pass either today or early tomorrow. The legislature has till June 15th to pass the budget, or they no longer get paid. So it's amazing that it seems to be passed by June 15th every year. So, but the good news, as Chair Linda Darlene Hammond did mention, included in that final budget deal was a total of $125 million in one-time funding to continue to address the ongoing teacher shortage. Specifically in that, $75 million of that 125 will be designated towards teacher residency programs. 50 of that 75 will be towards special ed specifically. 25 of that will be able to address STEM teachers. So that will be a teacher residency model. The other 50 million to make up the total 125 is also going to establish local solution grants. We talked about that a little bit when it came out in January. And those again will be one-time grants that will be administered locally all through LEAs. All this funding, I should mention, is Prop 98. So the grants will be administered through LEAs, and the local solutions will allow local districts to kind of figure out ways that they want to support additional special education teachers. So the local solutions grants, all special education money. The 75 is 50 of it is special education, 25 of it is for STEM teachers. So again, these will all go out in the form of grants, assuming that the legislature keeps all that 125 in when they pass the budget and that the governor signs it as is. The commission staff will begin working with stakeholders and begin looking at the process to put together RFPs and roll out these grants in 18-19. So again, as I mentioned, a legislature has till midnight tomorrow night. The governor has until June 30th to then sign the budget, and it goes into effect on July 1st. So with that, it was a fast report, but any questions? All pretty good news for us. So any questions?
Thank you. Very good news. I don't have any public comment cards, so do commissioners have any questions on this item?
I have a question, just a comment. I think I've said it before, but I think it's worth noting again. As the governor's going out, terming out, I just really want to highlight our appreciation for his dedication to public education, because he went in there saying he was dedicated to public education, and he's leaving showing how dedicated he's been this whole time. So I hope the next governor follows suit. Thanks.
Just to piggyback on that, if you look at the grants that have been established over the past, if you include this 125 and then the past 2 fiscal years, this governor will have allocated over $200 million in total towards teacher shortage, so over the 3 fiscal years.
I want to say ditto. I agree. Any other questions or comments? Okay. No action is needed on this item. Thank you, Ms. Peralt. This concludes the business before the Fiscal Policy and Planning Committee. The committee is adjourned.
All right. Next is the Educator Preparation Committee. Commissioner Gonzalez, will you please convene the committee?
Good morning once again. I'd like to call the June 2018 meeting of the Educator Preparation Committee to order. We have 8 agenda items. 6 of the items are scheduled for today, with 2 more tomorrow morning. The first item today is initial institutional approval Stage 2 eligibility requirements for Hollister School District. Lynette Roby is presenting this action item. Ms. Roby, will you begin, please?
Good morning, Commissioners. So I am here to present to you item 4A as a part of, again, the initial institutional approval process. These are the eligibility requirements, stage 2 for Hollister School District. And with us today representing Hollister is Jennifer Wildman, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, and Christine White, Principal on Special Assignment. Hollister School District seeks initial institutional approval in order to offer a teacher induction program, and a copy of Hollister's eligibility requirements document can be found in the attachment, which was hyperlinked within your agenda item. Hollister School District is located in San Benito County and serves a student population of approximately 5,500 students, of which approximately 40% are English learners. There are 5 elementary schools that serve students in grades K through 5, 1 school that serves K through 8, 2 middle schools that serve 6 through 8, and a dual language academy, as well as an accelerated achievement academy. On page 3 of the item, again, you'll find the table that includes staff recommendations for eligibility requirement criteria 1 through 9, as well as summaries of the institution's responses for criteria 10, 11, and 12. Upon review of the responses and evidence provided by the institution for criteria 1 through 9, the staff recommendation for each of these criteria is that of aligned. Beginning on page, I believe, 6, you'll also find the final 3 eligibility criteria for the Commission to consider, and these include criterion 10, mission and vision, criterion 11, history of prior experience and effectiveness in educator preparation, and criterion 12, which is capacity and resources. As you are aware, staff does not make the recommendations for these criteria, but we do provide a brief summary of the institution's responses. For criterion 11, it should be noted again that history of prior experience, the institution is required to post a third-party notification inviting comments, and they have to post that on their website, which they did, and to date, no comments have been received by the Commission. So in light of the information provided in the agenda item regarding Hollister School District, staff recommends that the Commission consider taking one of the following actions, either granting eligibility or denying eligibility. Should the Commissioners grant eligibility, they may identify topics that you would also look for in stage 3. If the Commission denies eligibility, you may identify what you see as missing in the current submission in the event that the institution would decide to continue to move forward and seek initial institutional approval and continue in the process. If approved by the Commission, Hollister School District will be allowed to move to stage 3. Approval of stage 2, approval of this stage does not authorize Hollister to offer an educator preparation program that would lead to a credential. Granting eligibility of stage 2 simply would move the institution on to stage 3, which is the submission of the preconditions and the common standards. And if stage 3 is approved in the future, that would lead to the possibility of the provisional approval. Staff is happy to answer any questions about process, and again, we have the representatives from Hollister School District to answer any questions about the responses to the eligibility requirements.
Thank you. I do not have any comment cards. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Ms. Roby or for our representatives here from Hollister School District? Commissioner Klatt?
Good morning. I just have a question, or it's, I guess, a question for when you come back, if that's I'm assuming that that might be what happens. In criterion 11, you noted that the mentors will be, it says full release, so I'm assuming you'll have full-time mentor coaches. And because that's such a critical part of induction, I would just be interested in seeing more about how you will select those mentors and a little bit more about what those positions will be. But that's for down the road, for down the road.
Chair Darling Hammond.
I was going in the same direction as Commissioner Klatt, and I want to be sure that I understand our process. And I would be delighted to hear your answer now if you'd like to give it about how you intend to select mentors. Is it expected in stage 3 when they would come back that they would say how mentors would be selected, what the ratio of mentors to beginning teachers would be, what the program would be for beginning teachers in years 1 and in year 2? Is that all part of what would be presented in stage 3?
There is some information provided in the preconditions about the mentorship, but where a lot of that would really be is in the program standards. But they can certainly bring that information back when they come back.
And the program standards are in what stage?
The program standards are actually stage 4, but they can submit them along with the preconditions and common standards, but it's the Committee on Accreditation that actually looks at those program standards or approves those.
Okay, so we can talk about our process, but meanwhile, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that question. Yeah.
There we go. So our current mentor has been working for us for about 4.5 years. She has been trained by the New Teacher Project and works with approximately 18 teachers a year, 18 to 20. She's had multiple years of experience across grade levels and across schools and has been a member of our school district for a long time. She's currently on a memorandum of understanding contract with the New Teacher Project. We have the potential to hire more mentors as we need them, knowing that the surrounding districts in our county may need support. There are 7 rural districts in our county that are single school, some of which have as few as 4 students. So if they get a new teacher, there's very little support within the county. The county is very small. So selecting a mentor that has experience with the types of school districts that we may end up serving would be really important to us. Within our own school district, we will receive funding for additional mentors. For instance, if we have a special education teacher that needs a mentor, it's funded and ready to go. We'd be seeking someone with experience. First, I think within our school district, also that matches the type of credential that the teacher is seeking to clear, and we would interview for that position and make sure that they were a good fit for our school district and also for the position. Yeah.
Commissioner Sloan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a question along similar lines. Part of this is we're seeing more and more school districts coming forward asking for intern programs, and there's very good reasons for doing so. And one thing that comes to mind is the kinds of supports that are available out there for those starting programs like this. And so I was intrigued with your relationship with the New Teacher Project in Santa Cruz, and I'm curious what the nature of that relationship is now and what it might be in future as you're developing your program.
So they have been amazing and amazingly supportive in this process. We've actually met with them several times. Like I said, our mentor has worked with the New Teacher Project for years. And in developing, I think, this plan over the last 8-9 months, we've realized that not only do our new teachers need support, but our mentors need support, and that the potential of having our own program meant that we needed to find support for our mentors. So we have a couple of things that I think we want to focus on. One is that our mentors would go to the New Teacher Project or the New Teacher Center to get their training. But within our own school district, we have a really strong instructional coach network, which actually is going through ongoing training with Partners in School Innovation and also meets on a monthly basis. The mentors would be part of that system. And they also get one-on-one coaching through that system. So our coaches and our mentors would receive a one-on-one coaching session of their own for that purpose. And I believe we were talking this morning about the necessity of also creating a community around our mentors and our new teacher induction, and wanting to have kind of a steering committee of our own. We participate in the steering committee for the new teacher project, but realizing this morning that even though we're small, that kind of building a community around our mentors and our new teachers is really important. So we were talking about who could be on that steering committee for us to kind of guide our work in the future. And would we, for instance, we have been wanting to set up a veteran teacher mentor program in addition to our new teacher mentor program. How do we support our veteran teachers, and can they be part of the support to our new teachers and at the same time be a network of their own? So that's the new teacher project has been amazing for us and continues to be a support. They're on the phone, they come out to see us, and it's been an interesting process of becoming our own induction program and not breaking that relationship, and working really hard to keep that because it's been really valuable for us.
So everything you were just saying sounds so good, and I would encourage you to include all of that in the next phases.
Absolutely.
Work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hear it.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments? Commissioner Brown?
I had a question about, and I hope that this is the right stage, a question about the technology and the technological resources that you would need. And I noticed that you were talking about becoming a Google certified district, and I wondered if this would be a good time to kind of describe that.
Actually, we're both watching our text this morning because all of our teachers are at technology training today. I'm actually fairly new to Hollister School District, and when I came into the district and found out that the Technology and Innovation Department is actually part of Educational Services, which is very unusual and kind of amazing, and that the district is really a gem in terms of innovation. So right now we have almost 100 teachers that are Google Level 1 certified, and we now, just this last month, have certified, I think, close to 20 Google certified Level 2 teachers. So technology is a big part of our school district, and it's a big part of the way that we operate. And so the administrators are encouraged to use technology for pretty much everything. Everything we do is on Google. We're a Google district. We actually were able to go to Google and went to a design thinking workshop. So now design thinking is a part of all of the programs that we're developing. So it's actually really an exciting addition. We actually have as part of this application that all of our materials are online and that they're all part of a basically hyperlinked. But we also put in an option for people who need paper because we do realize that occasionally we might get a teacher who has a little more experience who is not technologically astute yet. So we do kind of recognize the need to support all of the levels. But yeah, it's very exciting. Thank you for asking that question.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
I have one more. Go ahead.
Okay.
You go.
There, Charlie.
I saw that your ratio of mentees to mentors is between 18 and 23 to 1. It's a pretty high ratio. I'm just wondering, what does that allow the mentor to do with each of the beginning teachers in terms of on-site, in-class coaching?
We actually, just so you know, we've never, I don't think, gone beyond 19. It's just the ratio that we set. So this year we had 18. But you can talk about that if you'd like.
Yeah, the goal is to get it to 15. It's hard with our small district to make that happen sometimes. But yes, that's definitely our goal.
How often does the mentor able to be in each beginning teacher's classroom?
So I was going to answer one thing about this commissioner's question about the new teacher project. So we've been working since 1998, 2000 with the new teacher project in Santa Cruz. And so their focus is to keep them as low as possible. But what do the mentors do? The mentors are working with teachers one time, an hour a week at least, an hour a week, They're focused on communication. They're focused on collaboration. They're focused on looking at the CSTPs and making goals around them, developing their own individual learning plan in collaboration with the principal. And so they're constantly reflecting on their teaching as a twosome with the mentors and the participating teachers. But the standards are saying an hour a week, and so they're allocating at least that time. The mentors kind of have a flexible schedule at times, because sometimes it'll have to be in the evening or early in the morning, or
also, Hollister is a teeny, even though it's geographically big, when you look on a map, it's gigantic. I actually just moved to Hollister, and within 3 minutes can get to any school. So they're very, very close. There are 3 schools literally within about 5 blocks of my house, and so they're very geographically close. So she's able to travel from school to school very quickly.
See a mentor in their classroom for in-classroom coaching, and how much access they have for curriculum planning and problem solving, and how does that work out?
Good. We'll add that in.
One of the things we raised when we began to revise the accreditation standards for mentoring and induction programs was that in some places there were mentors, but they weren't actually getting into classrooms, and they weren't actually able to be available for curriculum planning, so they would meet with people in a group and go through the box, as it was called, and the forms, but not actually do the things that beginning teachers need. So we'd like to understand how that works out, and obviously we endorse your goal of getting the numbers, the ratios down
and
to
also
allow for
that's
that.
our philosophy of having the fully released mentors, so that they can get there during the day. They can be
in the classroom.
They can be in the classroom at the time that they're doing that, and can give that support and feedback as they're going along. So it'd be a mixture between in classroom and outside.
To your question, there is a precondition for the induction programs that is specifically related to mentors, so we can certainly have them answer those questions.
I think both the choice of the selection of mentors and the way in which beginning teachers will receive services, what services they'll receive.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners, for your questions and comments. This is an action item. Do I have a motion to either grant eligibility to Hollister School District and move forward to Stage 3, or deny eligibility?
I move to grant eligibility.
Thank you. We have a motion to grant. We have a second from Commissioner Barnes. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Roby. Thank you, Hollister School District.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next item is 4B, Initial Institutional Approval, Stage 2, Eligibility Requirements for the University of Antelope Valley. This is an action item. Ms. Roby, will you begin?
Thank you. So item 4B presents, again, as the part of the initial institutional approval process, the eligibility requirements, again, Stage 2, for the University of Antelope Valley, or from here on out, UAV. With us today from UAV are Shania Harris, Dean of Academic Affairs and Program Coordinator, and Crystal Stevens, Director of Institutional Effectiveness and Operations. UAV seeks initial institutional approval in order to offer a preliminary single-subject credential program. A copy of the eligibility requirements were provided within the agenda. UAV was founded in 1997 and was accredited by WASC Senior on February 19, 2016. UAV offers certificate programs, associate degree programs, bachelor degree programs, and master's programs. UAV's bachelor's degrees are offered in business management, communication, criminal justice, electrical engineering, healthcare management, sports management, and nursing. And the master's degrees are offered in business administration and criminal justice. And in 2013, UAV began a Master of Education program. On page 3 of the item, again, you'll find the table with staff recommendations for eligibility requirements 1 through 9 and the summaries of the institution's responses to the eligibility requirement 10, 11, and 12. Upon review of the responses and evidence, the criteria 1 through 9, staff recommendation for each of these is aligned. And beginning on page 6, you will find the 3 eligibility requirement criteria for the Commission to consider. And these, again, are criteria 10, 11, and 12. Staff, again, doesn't make a recommendation for 10, 11, and 12, but we did provide a summary response for each of those. And again, the institution for criterion 11, history of prior experience, was required to post a third-party notification, which they did, and we have not received comments to date. So in light of the information provided in this agenda item regarding University of Antelope Valley, staff recommends that the Commission consider taking one of the following actions, either to grant eligibility or deny eligibility. And again, just as a reminder, if you grant eligibility, you may identify topics that could be brought forward or looked for in stage 3. If you deny eligibility, you may identify what is missing in the current submission so that if the institution decides to come back and pursue initial institution, they have that to work with. If approved by the Commission, UAV will be allowed to move forward to stage 3. Approval of stage 2, again, does not authorize them to offer an educative preparation program. What it does is it moves the institution on to stage 3, which again is the submission of the preconditions and common standards, which after review will be brought back to you for consideration of possible provisional approval. We're happy to answer any process questions, and we have your representatives here to answer other questions about the program.
Once again, we do not have any comment cards. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to echo my previous question in the last item a little bit. In criterion 12, it states that master teachers will be required to hold a valid clear teaching credential, have a minimum of 4 years of effective teaching experience and knowledge of the content area. So that would be one thing when you come back. I would want to see a little bit more detail, or perhaps a lot more detail on that, specifically how you will define effective teaching experience and knowledge of content area, how you would determine that. And then the other thing too is if your master teachers have a full-time teaching position, how you will consider scheduling that would allow, kind of going back to Chair Darlene Hammond's earlier comment, to how you would ensure that there is time in the day for that master teacher to be able to effectively meet with any teachers or candidates that they would be working with. But again, if you have an answer to that now, that's great. But if not, I would like to see that information when you come back.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioners up.
So looking at criterion 11 and the history of prior experience in operating effective educator preparation, beyond Dr. Vieira, who we know is a fine educator, Learn for Life, though, is a charter, and I know that they don't have a lot of whole class instruction. Can you describe the process of developing the curriculum and what that looks like? It wasn't clear on the org chart how input in developing the best practices in effective teaching, particularly in hard areas like math, which you've targeted here. What's the process look like, and how will that design occur?
So are you referring to our actual curriculum or the partnership with the two?
What is your plan of the next step? So in developing these programs beyond the expertise of Dr. Vieira and Learn for Life?
Okay. So currently on our staff, we also have a Masters of Ed program, and we currently have several members that are veteran teachers teaching in our Masters and current teachers teaching in our Masters program. We also have our Curriculum Development Committee, which utilizes the expertise of our current staff and outside members to develop curriculum. So it would be beyond just Dr. Vieira's expertise in developing the curriculum.
Okay, so maybe you can give a little more insight into who is on that team. It's different than the master's program, and I believe it's an 18-credit master's program. But we know in credentialing, there are numerous standards and many details that need to have input in looking at the theory and being able to execute effectively. So if you could describe the expertise of those that will be part of that process.
So we will have an advisory board. We've already started this process. Is this on? Yes. With a combination of some staff that is with the school district that we've been working with, along with we have some faculty that currently hold teaching credentials that they will be actively involved in this process throughout the designing of the curriculum, as well as the individuals that Shonay has discussed.
Chair Darling Hammond.
Well, since we're talking about the master's degree, typically a master's degree is about 45 credits, and you're advertising an 18-credit master's degree. So I'm just curious, how does that work out?
I think it's just a misunderstanding. The master's degree is not 18 credits. What we were saying in the report is that 18 of those credits will be transferable to the master's program. So when you finish your credential, we are transferring some of those credits to go towards the master's. But you would have to take an additional 18 credits to obtain the master's degree. So our current master's degree is 36 credits, not the entire master's. If you're just coming in just to do your,
I think you'll want to correct that language.
Okay. Thank you.
And am I correct that the only credential programs you would be offering would be in math and science? Or are these additional? Again, it's maybe a wording question.
No, to start off, we're looking at single subject in math and science. You're correct.
In the attachment, there's a list of courses that look like they may already be designed, but this is to follow up on Commissioner Zeppo's question. Are those already prepared, or are those courses that you plan to design? The list that's in the attachment. I can find it again if that would be helpful to you. On page 9 of 20 in the attachment, it says some of these courses include classroom management and differentiated instruction, methods for teaching, subject-specific pedagogy, educational psychology, etc.
The process has been started. It's not finalized, but it is in the process.
So those are courses that you will have syllabi to bring to bear probably in the next stage.
Absolutely.
Okay. And since these are your only education credential programs, how do you think about sort of organizing and staffing that in a way that gives all of the accoutrements of an education program to the candidates?
Well, we plan on working one-on-one with the school district. So right now where we live, there's 5 smaller cities within the area, right? And Antelope Valley Union High School District governs all of those areas, right? So that's where Dr. Vieira comes in as well, because we will be working with them as far as staffing. Because he sits on our board, some of this is a push from the school district as well, because they know that there is a need for additional preparation programs. So we would be looking within the area and outside of the area, of course, looking to fulfill the need for faculty, master teachers, and stuff.
So in terms of your own, I guess part of what I'm asking is in terms of your own full-time university-based staff, aside from teachers you would get from the surrounding district to teach other teachers who are coming through, what plans do you have for staffing the program internally with your staff that you would be? In other words, building that infrastructure is what I'm getting at.
We currently hold faculty as adjunct instructors that are wanting more of a full-time role, more duties, expectations of them. So we are foreseeing that we would be expanding their role within the institution. And as with the growth of enrollment and with the program growing, we would continue to build the staff accordingly based on the ratios that we have developed, based on the mentors, the master teachers, whatever the case may be, based on those ratios where those staffing needs need to grow.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm also asking about sort of program administration. This may be stuff that comes back in the next stage, but program administration, credential analyst, counseling, supervisors, et cetera, who are not among the adjuncts. Mm-hmm. One of the concerns in university programs is always the stability of a staff that runs the system and takes care of the needs of candidates who are not adjuncts. Right, so that will be that. And when you have a small program, it's sometimes a challenge to be able to afford the infrastructure beyond hiring people to offer courses. So we'll be interested in that too.
I know the institution is very excited about the potential of getting this program going and eager to have that administrative staff properly allocated to where the needs are necessary, whether it's a credential analyst just doing the necessary documentation, getting that full-time program coordinator, whatever the case may be. The institution is very excited about this, so we're definitely going to house those full-time positions that are necessary to have this program run successfully.
So we'll look forward to learning more about those plans. How much of the program is online?
About 20%. We're anticipating just a few courses being available online. Mm-hmm. More of the lecture-based courses, or theory-based, I should say. So 20%.
There'll be two options for 100% face-to-face too. Mm-hmm. So we notice in our area, we have a lot of students who don't like the online platforms as much. So we want to make sure we're still capturing that ability to have a face-to-face 100% online.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I mean, on ground. Sorry.
Great. Last question, I think. So Antelope Valley is a for-profit institution. I'm curious what your tuition rates are or will be for the...
We're anticipating the tuition to be the same as our undergraduate program costs.
Which is?
$490 per credit.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zeppos?
Just to follow up on the staffing question, have you thought about, and I didn't see it in the organizational chart, of who will be the unit head in guiding this? I know you said adjuncts will primarily be serving, but who will, have you thought about who's going to be the unit head? I think it's Associate Dean. Okay.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, we currently have adjunct that we would move into full-time positions. So we don't want people, we don't want you guys to think that they're going to remain adjunct because we know we're adding responsibilities onto their current job description. They would become full-time. So we currently have some current members that we know we can probably pull to be full-time and meet those staffing needs.
And let me just maybe share my concern of what I hope to see in stage 3 then that I think would be important is that we know on the commission that the standards are very rigorous. They're often changing, that there has to be the buck stops of someone watching and overseeing to ensure 100% compliance in these areas. And at least through the documents that I've seen in the initial setup, it seems like you're relying on one district, and there are numerous districts in the area. So to ensure that a candidate would be prepared out of your program to serve not only all those districts in that area, but in any district in the state would need to be something that we can be assured about.
Commissioner Sloan?
Good morning. And to also sort of add to the questions around who the staff will be who are working directly with the candidates, particularly I'm going to point to the program instructors. Just had a question in the summary. You state that the program instructors will hold a valid, clear teaching credential. They'll have a minimum of 3 years of teaching experience in a public school setting and have the ability to design learning experiences that will integrate theory and practice. And so that is a good foundation. And then I would encourage you to know more about who the program instructors are with respect to their experience in teacher education. So we all know that great teachers can be great teachers of K-12 students and not necessarily great teacher educators. So what is the experience that you're going to require in teacher education and or assurances that your program instructors are quality teacher educators? Be what I want to see.
Any other questions or comments, commissioners? Hearing none, this is an action item. Oh, okay. Chair Darling Hammond.
Yes. So we've raised a lot of questions here about items. Are we correct in assuming that those would be addressed at stage 3 before the program went into operation? It would come back to us with those kinds of information?
Yes, that's the point of, asking those questions. And if that's what you would like, is that information to be brought back in stage 3, that it will be.
So we had questions about sort of the staffing, the curriculum, the specifics of the curriculum, et cetera.
So I have questions regarding the staffing, oversight, full-time staff, et cetera, as well as curriculum development. I believe that was one. And then also the instructor experience or faculty experience. Was there any other?
That's what I heard. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the comments and questions. This is an action item. Do I have a motion to either grant eligibility to the University of Antelope Valley and move forward to stage 3 or deny eligibility? Commissioner Hine, is that a motion or is it a?
I move to grant eligibility.
We have a motion to grant. Is there a second? Commissioner Klatt, thank you. We have a second. Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Roby and members from University of Antelope.
Before we leave this item, could I just make a request of staff, which is, I think what we are all experiencing is trying to understand at each stage what we could expect to see and wanting to see more about the plans at each stage, because we want to be responsible, in moving people along, and we don't want them to put forward a lot of effort towards what may or may not prove to be adequate. And so I guess what I would just like us to think about is how can we get as much information as possible? I did not find the attachments as complete and comprehensive as I would have liked to have to make a judgment about whether things were on the right track to move through the other stages. So I don't know if we can just figure out how to beef up the information, or whether we need to have another conversation at another meeting about what comes to us at each stage.
Thank you, Ms. Roby. Item 4C, Proposed Preliminary Administrative Services Credential Program Standards Editions. This is an action item. Terry Clark and Amy Rising are presenting this item. Ms. Clark, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Commissioners. This item presents updates to the Preliminary Administrative Services Program Standards for your review and adoption. These updates have to do with embedding the APA into the preliminary administrative programs. The updates were brought to you in April by Ms. Roby. You did not have any questions at that time. Ms. Roby's spending some time with family, so you'll see it's now taking two of us to present the item in her stead. Amy Rising is here with me because she has deep knowledge of the Cal APA, which is the performance assessment that's been developed for these sets of programs. The updates to the standards, which you can see in Appendix A, are modeled on the multiple single subject teacher preparation program standards, which have had a performance assessment embedded in them for years. There are three issues that were raised by stakeholders with the April version of the standards. As you can see, starting on page Let me get back to the right item. I've got more than one item open on the computer. Starting on page 2 of the item, the 3 issues, Gay Roby worked with preliminary administrative service program leaders to really understand and to ensure that we've addressed each of the issues. The APA is ready to be implemented in the 18-19 year, as you heard earlier in the budget update. This is a non-consequential administration for this year. You're the ones who approve that plan because we want to ensure that sufficient information is understood by all the programs, the assessment has been effectively implemented and embedded into the program, and that no candidate is unintentionally harmed by this new assessment that hasn't been in place before. Beginning with the 19-20 year, passage of this assessment would be required before you could be recommended for a preliminary administrative services credential. The plan is to monitor the implementation as part of our usual work with the programs. At this point in time, because of this new assessment, we are working very closely with preliminary administrative services programs. There are multiple technical assistance activities throughout the year. We actually work to ensure that every institution that offers the program attends those activities. It gets to the point that if they haven't registered, their dean and their program director gets an email from me saying, this is a really important activity. We'd really like you to participate. So we're going to monitor it during the next coming year, but not require any submission addressing these standards at this time. We do recommend that you adopt these revisions. The revisions are in Appendix A with strike-through and underlined language. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. I do have a few comment cards. Can I have Peg Winkleman come up, please? If you can please state your name and affiliation for the record. Dr. Ardella Daly.
Peg Winkleman, California Association of Professors of Educational Administration. Thank you for working with us in responding to the issues we raised at the April meeting. We have responses to your responses and suggestions. We didn't just respond, we offered some suggestions. So I, as Terry did, will be taking you through the item response by response. So issue 1, use of the term placement. We appreciate the recognition that we support candidates where they are working. We coach, we supervise. This is an embedded assessment. So placement as a term just didn't work because we're supporting them where they work. Issue 2, the wide range of school contexts in which candidates are completing their field work may result in significant differences in Cal APA submissions. We agree with the staff's suggestion that in the training for the Cal APA assessors, the issue of avoiding assessor bias relating to issues of candidate placement, local resources, and other factors not directly related to the assessment of the candidate competence should be addressed. In addition, we note that candidates should be recognized for completing the APA tasks in schools, districts, or other workplace settings which are less able to support the candidate's ability to complete the APA, demonstrate commitment to collaborative student-centered practices and continuous program improvement, have partnerships with appropriate other educational, social, and community entities that support teaching and learning for all students, create a learning culture that supports all students, understand and reflect socioeconomic and cultural diversity, support the candidate to access data, work with other educators and observe teaching practice, and permit video capture where designated from candidate reflection and APA task completion. We suggest that in this non-consequential year, exemplars of candidate APA submissions which demonstrate satisfactory work in challenging settings should be collected and distributed to calibrate equitable assessment of candidates' performance. Issue 3, concerns about the feasibility of video recording. We suggest that in this non-consequential year, attention needs to be paid to candidates' reports that they are unable to videotape APA tasks in schools, districts, and other educational settings in which they work. As we get to the appendix, programs provide fieldwork experiences in the schools district. This is the part about candidates must complete, and the settings must. Under category 3. Programs provide fieldwork experiences in the schools, districts, and other settings where their candidates are employed. Preliminary administrative services programs can't assure, that all educator workplace settings, as I read before, meet these criteria. Not absolutely assure. So, we suggest that, looking at an APA design team member next to me, we suggest that the APA design team create a letter outlining the conditions necessary for past candidates to complete the APA tasks required by the CTC. Past programs could distribute the letter to school districts and other settings where past candidates are employed. This sort of puts them on notice. This is our expectation. It's personalized to this is what we're doing this year. Finally, there is a piece about the media release where we are. At this time, past programs cannot assure that all fieldwork settings will provide a media release. We cannot discriminate against qualified candidates who serve in educational settings where a media release may not be provided. So those are our responses to your responses, which we greatly appreciate around our concerns.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that I wear multiple hats at this point. I am in faculty at Cal State East Bay and teach in both the PAST and ASK programs. I am a CAPIA member and have been active on the board, and I also sit currently on the APA design team. Kind of went full force into commitment. Commitment around this. And so in reviewing this and working through CAPIA, I think we're pretty much in line where I know we're going and that what's being asked, and just to clarify with you and everyone else publicly, that we monitor certain pieces of this so that at the end of our process we'll be able to address and ensure we're providing equity for our candidates that are in districts who don't have the resources, who aren't quite there in where they should be in terms of their directions to their staff and how they handle evaluation and supervision. And so you can't fault them for being in the settings they are. And so therefore, when they produce their assessment, that needs to be looked at in that context, and they describe their context as a part of the process. So all we're basically saying, we're in agreement, we're marching forward with this. We just want to tweak at this point a couple things. So.
Yeah, and this is Dr. Della Daly.
Oh. I always forget to introduce
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Dr. Daly and I just wanted to emphasize is the importance of not disadvantaging a candidate, candidates or a candidate who choose to work in the most challenging settings, often serving the most vulnerable student populations. So that's our emphasis, and we feel that the suggestions we offer will work towards that end.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Chair Darling Hammond.
Thank you so much. It's great to get an update. I know this has been quite an intensive process, and we appreciate everybody's work and engagement. And welcome to the family. It sounds like you got put to work right away in multiple ways. Couple of thoughts about the context variation point that you're bringing up. One is that I was on the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards at the beginning when they really started the process of figuring out how to train reviewers to deal with context issues. So I don't know if we've tapped their knowledge base, but that would be something that we might want to carry into this process because they spent many years and many studies figuring out how to train people so that context would not detract from the fairness of the score. The other thing I'm I'm sure you're thinking of as well, and that we need to balance is, of course, we want standards to be comparable, even while we want to acknowledge the difference in the context in which people are placed or doing their work. Part of the word that comes to mind is burden, but I don't mean that word. Part of the responsibility for helping candidates be able to engage is the universities and the programs, right? And so we need to also be sending a message to programs that's not just about whether the district is prepared to do, as we found with the teacher performance assessment, programs had to figure out how to support candidates, supervisors, and other members of the program family in doing that work, even as we were reaching out to the field to help, mentors in the field learn how to be supportive as well. So I hope that whatever adjustments we make it clear that the standards remain comparable and we're making the right kind of frameworks for candidates to be optimally successful and to be fairly evaluated. You want to speak to that?
Well, I just wanted to say that's absolutely in line with what we're thinking.
Ms. Clark?
With this plan for the non-consequential year, we'll be starting in the fall, and you could ask us for an update in spring of 2019 for how is this all going as we get to April and June of 2019, and Amy and Gay can come back to you and give you an update. Are any of these things that we've been monitoring concerns? Do there need to be any tweaks, or are we ready to go into operational consequential year? So we'd be very pleased to be able to do that for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's scheduled already. I can offer one piece of sort of work with districts that we're working on currently and should be coming out soon as a letter going to districts from the Commission and hopefully in conjunction with the Department of Education to districts announcing the redeveloped Cal TPA and the APA and expectations around support, and just a sort of heads up, we're coming forward with this, and you're going to have candidates in your context, in your environment these assessments require these kinds of access to data and other colleagues. So that is already in the pipeline, and hopefully, within a few weeks, we'll have that ready to go out. And we're also reaching out to AXA and others around the state to continue to share this work so that they're ready as well. So we're trying to work on both sides with the districts and with faculty and program.
Commissioner Redmond.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation and the work. A question on something you said that struck me around some candidates are working with some of our most vulnerable young people in challenging situations. We don't want to disadvantage them, but they also are working with some of our most vulnerable students, and so we need to know that they need to have the expertise to be able to do the job as well as they possibly can. I think we've done a lot of, we understand it's really hard, and so you won't get the outcomes that others will get. And so how are you thinking about that we don't want to disadvantage candidates in working who are in challenging circumstances, but we also want to make sure that we know that they are doing the best possible job with those students.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've hit on the core of the balancing act that we find. And going back to this issue, if we have the standards and hold them as being the core pieces that we're working on, for the students, our adjustment as a university, and when we work with our students is, okay, so you don't have X at your school, But in fact, we're asking you to do teacher observation. So in your system there at that particular school or district, they actually don't do teacher observations, only teacher evaluations. So there's not a process for feedback for teachers that's not connected to the evaluation process, as an example, and they won't let you, they're telling you can't do it. Our intersection with the district then becomes one in which we then have to come forward and say, this is what is required, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't support them, but we have coaches and we have fieldwork supervisors that will support them through the process. So we make that kind of linkage for it. What we're bringing up in this process for the APA is that when a student is asked to describe that setting, we don't want that to interfere with a decision about did they do it or didn't. It's the content of what they came out of, given they needed these additional supports, which are valid supports.
Thank you. Just a super quick response.
Sure.
And just sort of, I feel like for us is, and I think that's exactly right. And sort of the idea of the new standards is we want, even in the most challenging circumstances, the candidates to feel that they will thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the past, too often, folks were even caught off guard mm-hmm. by certain situations, and in no way felt that they would thrive. They were just trying to survive, and we want right. the level of thriving, and so I think we're all pushing for that, and that's the impetus of my question.
Thank you,
Commissioner Sloan.
I'm going to build on Commissioner Redmond's question and the balancing act. I recall that we had something similar when we were first doing the TPA in California, that if candidates couldn't do what they really wanted to do within settings, there was an ability to describe why. But then I also know that over time, I mean, one of the important considerations in building an assessment is that it's okay to teach to the test when it's a good test and when it's embodying the kinds of performance that you want to see in real life. And I think that is true for the APA and the TPA in many ways. But this is making me think. So your example about teacher observation is compelling. And so if a candidate is working in a district where that isn't an option, but we want the candidate to engage, and they can engage on some level, is there an option then for the candidate to say this, whatever it was about the experience that he or she may want to take into the next phases of his or her work, not just explain why I couldn't do it, but explain what they learned from it and what they're taking from it, for instance. Maybe this is going beyond the reach of the APA, but it's interesting.
Because I'm on the APA design team, there, as a part of the assessment process, there's a reflection piece that's consistent throughout, and an analysis that they do of, so what did I learn, what did I gain from that, where will I take it next? And they speak to that. And there's a rubric in which we evaluate that.
That is great, because if we hope that these assessments can also sort of bring the level up of everybody's, learning and eventual performance, right?
One of the things I'd add is that what I have found in this process that is most valuable is that it is forcing both programs and districts to look at practice and what is happening for students. Mm-hmm. It will force them, and it is forcing them. And it's at the same time at least got a standard on the table to talk about what that needs to look like, which, right. And I speak as a superintendent, which is another hat I wore at one point in my life, and I find that extremely important.
Yep.
As a piece of this process, and I see that being the most influential in having different outcomes for students, which is the bottom line.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Before I call for the vote, I want to thank the Cal APA design team for the work that's unfolded. I appreciate the comments on notice, and then again the observation piece as a superintendent, and sitting and talking about as we try to work through our collective bargaining agreements and the challenges that we have there. That notice is of extreme importance. Not only I say to all of our educational partners and affiliates, whether it's CSBA all the way to CTA, so we have an understanding and we can start to build and have those dialogues, whether it's in the form of an MOU to support these candidates within our collective bargaining agreements. That way we don't create that impediment through our process, because there are some bulletproof CBAs out there that can cause a challenge. So thank you for those comments. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none, this is an action item. Do I have a motion to adopt the proposed changes to the preliminary administrative services program standards as presented and with the additional recommendations, if you will? Okay, I'll take Commissioner Zumot as a motion, and I'll take Chair Darlingham as a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. We are going to take a 12-minute break here for, yes, 12. That means you all will take 15. So if you can be back by 10:45, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Next item on this morning's agenda, we have item 4D, Intern Program Early Completion Option, Entry Requirement Modification. This item is being presented by Terry Clark and Bob Locks. This is an action item. Ms. Clark, will you begin, please?
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. This item addresses the Intern Early Completion Option. In April, we brought you an item with information on the early completion option, and you asked us to go back and think a little bit more about the ECO and bring us back some additional information. Here at the table, Bob Locks is our staff consultant who supports all the teacher intern programs, so he's here in case you have questions about how the intern programs view this. He has talked with a number of programs, the larger programs and the programs that have had the most ECO candidates recently. And Ms. Rising here is to my left because of her deep understanding of the Cal TPA, in case you have questions about that. Staff understands your concern that ECO candidates need to be ready to teach. They need to be effective teachers, and you want an assurance of that if they're going to be in the ECO option. The ECO option is an education code, and it's designed to allow individuals who already have all the knowledge and skills to be a teacher to have an expedited route to earn a teaching credential. On page 3 of the item, you actually see the list of intern program requirements, with the additional one from the next to the bottom one is they have to take and pass an assessment, the assessment of professional knowledge. And you've had some concerns because that assessment has a fairly high pass rate. There has been a requirement that a candidate had to submit a first task of a TPA to be scored as part of the entry requirements for the early completion option. That no longer really works because the TPAs require you to actually be with students, and when the intern is starting the school year with ECO, they are not with students prior to that time. So we spent some time thinking, talking to some programs, and we've come up with a recommendation that puts a time limit of 4 months where all ECO candidates must take a part of a commission-approved TPA, submit it, and pass it to remain in the ECO. If they don't pass that first submission, they would then become a traditional intern. The table on the bottom of page 3 identifies the options. 2 of the 3 commission-approved performance assessments have 2 tasks that are submitted. One is submitted and scored, and then the second one is submitted and scored. And so for both the Cal TPA and the FAST, we are recommending that you take action to say that they must complete one of the tasks or cycles, submit it and pass it within the first 4 months. And then within the remainder of the school year, they must complete the rest of the performance assessment. The Ed TPA is a little bit more challenging because it is a single submission that is scored once. So we have 3 options there in the table on page 3. Option 1 is the Ed TPA using institutions would have their candidates submit and pass the entire Ed TPA within the 4 months. We have worked with scale. There are submission windows in the fall, and that would be doable. If you have concerns that it may not be appropriate or fair to require the entire submission within the first 4 months, we have 2 additional options that would also require candidates at Ed TPA using institutions to submit something within the first 4 months and pass it, and then to complete it within the year. The 2 options we have identified so far are option 2, all Ed TPA using institutions could be required to use the Cal TPA for their ECO candidates only. Now, this is a little bit challenging because they're an Ed TPA using institution, so they're not really ready for the Cal TPA, but all the performance assessments measure the TPEs. The TPEs are consistent. So, and in ECO, the candidate is not really enrolled in the program. They're not going to courses with all the other candidates. So it doesn't seem that it's impossible that Ed TPA institutions could choose to use the Cal TPA for ECO candidates. The third option there in the table is we could require the candidate to submit the first instructional cycle for Cal TPA within the first 4 months. They would have to pay for that. And then by the end of the school year, they would have to submit the full Ed TPA. So that there does have an additional cost for candidates, but again, they're not paying as much for tuition and coursework as traditional candidates. We hope that by adding this 4-month requirement where the candidate must submit and actually pass a portion of a commission-approved TPA is sufficient assurance that this individual can actually teach in front of a class of children. If the candidate cannot teach and they don't pass that assessment, they become a regular intern. All interns must receive the 144 hours plus 45 more hours of English learner support and supervision. That would continue to be the case for ECO candidates. The recommendations are on page 3 of the item, that you modify the requirement for the ECO to remove completion as an entry requirement, that you modify the completion requirements to require a task within the first 4 months and the full TPA passed within the school year, and that you select one or more of the options for completion of the ECO for EdTPA using institutions. One of the reasons you might want to select more than one of the options would be to allow the EdTPA using institutions to make a personal decision about which way this is. They might feel that for their specific program, the candidates asking them to do the full EdTPA within 4 months would not be appropriate. They might want to use one of those other options. We are here to answer questions if you have any, and we are asking that you take these 3 recommendations into account. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a few comment cards. Rigel Massaro, if you can please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good morning, Rachel Massaro with Public Advocates. I really appreciate staff's work on this item. I can really see how they've heard the feedback from the recent meetings and advanced these options. As an initial matter, I believe this came up at the April meeting, I wonder about this statute. And so this is not something this body can act on today. And at the same time, the item in April verified what I understood, which was that this statute was established to enable individuals to earn a credential when they had teaching expertise and experience that was really equivalent to having completed the student teaching and the coursework associated with a preliminary credential. My understanding is it's not being utilized in that form. It wasn't created as a method by which smart college graduates could get out of a teaching credentialing program. And so that concerns me, and I think it's worth a discussion, not today necessarily, but revisiting the intent and the actual use of this option. At least to consider perhaps an experience requirement. On this item before us today, I think, I note that the statute requires this test. This is a test that, to my understanding, is only used for this purpose. This isn't a test that the commission requires of any other teacher candidate. It has exceptionally high pass rates, and my understanding is those are higher than any other exam that the commission requires. So I question that exam, and I question its ability and its validity in terms of assessing our candidates, only based on those 2 criteria. And then the statute also requires passing the TPA. It doesn't specify a timeline for passage. From our position, passing that test in its entirety as soon as is feasible, given the nature and the components of that assessment, is the gold standard, is what we should be aiming for, because we don't want people in front of our students who are not in a program, and so waiting a year until they're required to do that for us is problematic. So I would say that what we would advocate for is passage of the test, passage of the TPA within those first 4 months of teaching. And I understand that's a tall order. That is not easy. I don't think it should be easy at all to go through this pathway. It's really hard to be an intern teacher, and if you're going to avoid the coursework that you need, I think that it's going to be a hard thing to do. As an aside, it was a long time ago, but I was an intern teacher. I had the statute notes that it's based on demonstrated competence of the field experience component of the internship program. My field experience was in a summer school program, and I was one of 3 intern candidates assigned to a class of 12 students. I myself taught about 40 minutes a day, and it was a very rigorous summer. I didn't sleep much. I did a lot of coursework, but I mean to bring this up to say that I might have looked really great for those 40 minutes a day, and I'm not sure it actually was meaningful information when I was placed in a full-time middle school classroom with 34 students. So that is an aside, not relevant to this discussion, more relevant to the statute conversation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Danette Brown?
Now it's on. Danette Brown, representing the California Teachers Association. So, the agenda item says, in the first paragraph of the introduction, the ECO provides well-prepared candidates to demonstrate their ability to teach and opt out of coursework. Our understanding is that if you are so well-prepared that you do not need the support, knowledge of coursework, then passing the TPA in as short a time as possible should be doable for you. Because what we're saying is that you excel. You have demonstrated in some other capacity that you meet these requirements and you can be in front of students and be their teacher of record. Giving those ECO candidates a year to pass the TPA, we believe has potential negative consequences for students. If you are so well prepared that you do not need the support and knowledge of coursework, pass the TPA, whichever TPA, within the shortest amount of time possible so that the students get that guarantee of a well-prepared teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle B. Badavinac. Oh. Please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good afternoon. Michelle Badavinac with Teachers College of San Joaquin. We are one of the larger intern programs in the state and therefore probably have a few more ECO candidates than some places, although I think we also would concur with some of the concerns that have already been addressed in relation to ECO. But one question I do have is, in our program, candidates can only enter our program in the fall semester. And as interns, they're already in a classroom. So my question is, if they are, I guess it's clarification, would they indicate prior to their enrollment in fall coursework, I want to be an ECO candidate, and therefore not be enrolled in fall coursework, then would take the TPA. If they pass, they continue in the ECO track and would have to pass the second TPA, and that's all great. My concern is with the candidates who potentially say, yes, I do want to be a candidate, and then fail that first TPA. What that means in our program, at least, is they are out of coursework until the following fall. So one of my clarifications would be, can we require them to start coursework, as all candidates, until they pass that first TPA, and then if they do, opt them out to minimize the impact on somebody who perhaps is not as well qualified as they think they might be. So that's something that we'd like you to consider. The other option or the other important information is that I think probably most intern programs are very sequential in their approach to coursework, and so the option of entering someone into a second semester when they've missed the first semester is problematic. So thank you.
Commissioners, any questions, comments on this item? Chair Darling Hammond.
I really appreciate all the comments that came to the table. I have been reading the Ed Code attachment, Appendix A, for those who want to read along, because I think it's very central to the question here. As I read it, it says, the early completion option shall be made available to interns who meet the following requirements. Not who might meet or who want to meet, but who meet. 1, pass a written assessment that assesses knowledge of teaching foundations, is adopted for this purpose by the Commission and includes all the following, and it lists A through G, and that's the, what do we call that, APK or whatever?
The APK.
Yeah. And then 2, pass the teaching performance assessment. Not want to pass the teaching performance assessment or might pass, but pass it. So that would suggest, and I've read through the rest of the Ed Code language, I don't see anywhere where it says that they need to be excused from coursework before they have met those 2 requirements. So the straightforward reading of the law would be pass the written test, pass the performance assessment, stay in coursework until that happens, and then if you have passed, you can be excused, so to speak. And I think that's what the last comment suggested, and I actually think it's what all 3 of the comments suggested. I think that's what we should do.
My question then is, the candidate actually does not enroll in ECO until they have passed the APK and passed the TPA. So that's when they stop their courses. Do you also want to put a time limit on when they have to pass the TPA, or they just stay, they're an intern, they're taking courses?
I think our job is to be responsible to students. And our job in being responsible to students is to say, you have a teacher who's learning to teach with all the mentoring and supervision that internship programs have associated with them. And if you want to complete early, you might be in a 2-year intern program, many of them are. If you want to complete early, then you meet these 2 standards early. And if we can organize it so that the Cal TPA or the Ed TPA or the FAST can be made available earlier so that people can challenge that assessment quickly, then I think the law would encourage that, but they should complete it.
Is that a motion?
Commissioner.
Would be happy to so move, but there may be a little discussion
Brown.
before.
I just wanted to add that in that statute there's actually 4 requirements, and the 3rd one is to pass reading instruction competence assessment, as well as meeting the requirements for teacher fitness. So I did the same thing you did as I was reading this and thinking, wait, don't they need to do this first before they are qualified to become, and is it ECO or EOC? ECO. So I would, if you're working on a motion, I would be comprehensive in what the statute requires.
And I think for those who are, we could just engage on this. For those who do come in with the experience and so on, as I guess the law was originally intended for, they could have taken the RECA and, they can be moving along as expeditiously as our testing schedules allow them so to do. And we may want to encourage and facilitate that if we want to live with the spirit of the law.
Commissioner Sloan?
I agree with everything that has been said here, and I'm just going to take this moment to comment on the whole ECO option in general, and in the hope that we might look at this further someday and educate others about what some of us find so problematic about it. So as we've already mentioned, we know it has something like a 94% pass rate, correct? We saw that in the last meeting. Additionally, if we think that the ECO option seems to be alleviating entry challenges for teachers of color, what we're seeing is 68% of the ECO completers are white. It also doesn't seem to be catering to people who have experience to bear on teaching, because 75% of them are under 30. So what is it doing for us and for our students? I'm also thinking about the TPEs and the ways that we've revised them over time. They're very performance-based in nature. And to what extent does the APK emulate that kind of performance-based nature of the TPEs? So we in California, if you think about coursework, often people think about, well, courses is where you learn knowledge. I mean, that's what we have all experienced in college. But in teacher education, that's very different. Courses have to be very much applied to what they're going to be doing in classrooms. The kinds of things that you learn in a course now in teacher education, our accreditation requires that throughout our programs we show with each TPE, 1, where it's introduced to candidates, 2, where it's practiced and how, and then 3, how it's assessed and demonstrated that it's met in a classroom or some sort of other assessment that is very much applied. To what extent does the APK do that our courses currently do now that our TPEs are so performance-based? The other thing that we're required to do as programs is ensure that we are measuring all of the TPEs in all of their entirety. We know the TPA does not measure every TPE. We know that we have additional assessments in our programs that do that. Does the APK plus the TPA plus the RECA do the same things that programs do? These are the kinds of things that I think are really important to look into at some point if we can.
Commissioner Grinnell-Shire.
I appreciate the thoughtful comments of Commissioner Sloan about the concerns that we share with this particular option, so I won't repeat them. And I appreciate that we are following the Ed Code. But as I was thinking about this agenda item, the burden of proof should be on the individual. And we should try and minimize the risks to students in this decision. So I'm very comfortable with where we're going. Thank you.
Commissioners?
Yeah, just for clarification, I understand that you want the entire TPA to be, or that's what you're thinking about, having the entire TPA completed. But do you want that? So would they have the entire 2 years of their program to do that, or do you feel that it should be completed within the first year?
Can I speak to my view on that? I think that they could complete it whenever they complete it. Until then, they are a fully engaged intern doing everything all the other interns are doing to get all of the benefit of the coursework and supervision and mentoring and everything else that supports them in learning to teach. And I will note, while the pass rate on the APK is high, as Commissioner Sloan mentioned, the pass rate for ECO candidates is low on the TPA. So they are not passing the TPA at the rate that other candidates are, and they are and they're not in coursework. Even, they're not actually learning, and they're teaching kids, and they're not passing the TPA at the rates that other candidates are. Maybe Terry would like to quote the statistic on that, because I learned it from you.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but you're right.
Yeah, it's a low pass rate. So I think this is the responsible thing to do, and I would like to so move.
We have a motion. Second by Commissioner Hind. Any further discussion? Were we able to capture that motion?
We have the motion, yes.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
I have a question about what the motion even means, or not what the motion means, but kind of what going forward we may end up doing. And as far as the test, it's, the APK, if that seems to be also, is that something that we would want to revisit? If extremely high pass rate, but it doesn't necessarily help you to get to the next stage? Is that something we want to revisit if that's only for this one circumstance?
I think that the question then becomes the Ed Code law itself. That test was adopted to meet the Ed Code requirement that there be such a written assessment. We could revisit it and try to develop a different written assessment. This is a pretty small number of candidates, so I think it's worth us having an agenda item on this so that we could really look into Commissioner Redmond's point and the broader points that have been made about the ECO option and how do we want to configure our response to it. So yes, I think we should make an agenda item.
Commissioner Sloan?
I forgot one more thing that I thought was pretty important last time, and that is, so once an ECO candidate now passes the APK, the RECA, and the TPA, they will no longer be in the intern program. And so they will no longer be receiving those supports through wherever they are in the school year. But they won't necessarily be in an induction program either, will they, if they're finished mid-year?
I actually disagree. I think in our new world with induction, the day someone earns their preliminary credential and has a job, they should be starting their induction that day.
Okay.
Because induction is individualized, it's one-on-one, it's the coach mentor working with that new teacher, so it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't matter if the person gets their credential and has it in September or if they get it in February. They should get a mentor and they should be supported in induction from that day on.
And is that the requirement then? Are school districts aware of all of that?
They are. We're talking it through. It's
Okay.
been a big change for them because the induction standards were very, very different. But that is the message we are sharing, that this is individualized and really your candidates need to be supported from the first day they're teaching on their preliminary credential.
Good. Good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Mr. Locks, Ms. Rising.
Did we vote?
We did.
Oh, good. Thank you.
The questions and comments continued afterwards. Yes.
Just for,
yeah,
We
called
don't think you voted.
I called for the vote, and we voted. Yes. Then the comment came after.
That's right. Oh, yes, we voted before the question came.
Just for
I
clarity.
do want to point out that this does need to be put in regulations. You will see this item at least twice more in this next year because we have to have the regulatory item and the public hearing item. But we will disperse this information to all intern programs so they understand the action you've taken.
Ms. Zeppos?
Just a point of clarification. So it's any of the TPAs. Got it.
We clear on the record, Haiju? Are we clear on the record in regards to motion? Second, vote. Thank you. Item 4E is addressing teacher shortage in career technical education. This item is being presented by Jake Schuler, Bob Locks, and Terry Clark. This is an information action item. Mr. Schuler, will you please begin?
Good morning, Commissioners. So I will be presenting this item this morning along with my colleague Bob Locks, and we also have at the table with us this morning Donna Wyatt from the California Department of Education, who's the Director of the Career and College Transition Division, as well as Rose Owens-West from West Ed. She's the Equity Project Director at the California Comprehensive Center at West Ed. So they're here at the table with us this morning to answer questions and also contribute to the conversation after our presentation. We really appreciate them both being here. We know that finding solutions for CTE credentialing takes a true team effort. So in recent years, the state and local education agencies have begun developing more CTE courses and expanding career pathway programs. In addition, more CTE courses have been approved to fulfill A through F academic requirements. These conditions have led to a shortage of CTE teachers who have both the industry experience and also the academic content knowledge to obtain a CTE credential and to teach appropriate courses. In an effort to address the issues of CTE credentialing, the CDE and CTC convened a stakeholder group that met throughout the fall of 2016, and CTC staff has brought several agenda items to the Commission over the past 2 years with many of the proposals that were developed during those meetings. Some of these proposals included ways to create a streamlined process for general education teachers or community college teachers to earn their CTE credential. At this point, each of those proposals that staff has brought to the Commission have been met with various concerns from both commissioners as well as stakeholders, and while the discussions have continued, there's been no forward progress on solutions at this point. CTE credentialing is one of the more complex areas of credentialing. California Education Code currently requires that candidates for the CTE credential possess a minimum of 3 years of industry work experience, as well as complete 9 units of coursework related to safety, working with English learners, and basic teaching pedagogy. In order to try and move forward on this issue, staff is presenting to you today a new option that would allow the department and the Commission to complete a more holistic review of the issues that need to be addressed surrounding CTE credentialing. And Bob will now speak to the new approach.
Staff recommendations at recent past Commission meetings regarding changes to the CTE have been met with concerns, so very little progress in addressing the CTE teacher shortage has been made, while the demand for CTE teachers continues to increase. WestEd's California Comprehensive Center has volunteered to help gather a work group to look at the current issues surrounding CTE and to see if together with the CDE and other stakeholders we can come to a workable solution. In the agenda item, if you look at page 7, Appendix C, there is a list there of 50 questions that the Comprehensive Center has developed that they feel help identify the obstacles and solutions for dealing with the teacher shortage in CTE. And as you can see, they've already put a lot of work into this, with many of these questions are very in-depth. While some of these questions are related to the teacher workforce, we recognize that there are also questions that are not under the CTC's purview. Even with some of these questions outside of the Commission's authority, having a work group similar to what the state used for their special education concerns 2 years ago to work on these issues collaboratively and to discover some solutions for easing the CTE staffing shortage is the right direction to go in. Now, if you turn back to page 2 of your agenda item, you can also see 5 questions that the Commission and the CDE have identified as some basic areas that we feel need to be addressed in developing a positive approach to staffing the CTE programs. Staff requests that the Commission discuss a proposal for staff to participate in a work group with CDE and WestEd's Comprehensive Center to explore the 5 questions identified on page 2 and the questions they feel are relevant in the 50 questions of Appendix C. Staff could then help to develop a work plan and provide updates on the progress of this work to the Commission. And as a reminder, during your discussion, we have Rose Owens-West from WestEd Comprehensive Center here with us, and also Donna Wyatt from the California Department of Ed. Thank you.
I think just to conclude, the statewide special education task force that took place, where the state board, the Department of Ed, the Commission, we had 5, 6 different subgroups within that, and they looked at special education from kind of 360 degrees. That is what we think needs to really happen with career technical education, and we're hoping that you're supportive of that idea, and we're interested in talking with our partners to see if we can make that come to fruition. Thank you.
Danette Brown, if you can come up for comment, please, and if you could state your name and affiliation for the record.
Danette Brown, representing the California Teachers Association. First of all, I have to thank everybody in this room and a whole lot of people not in this room for their perseverance in addressing the career technical ed arena. We understand that this is a complex issue, and I know it's come before the Commission many times, and we've heard a lot of input from a variety of people. So we appreciate the Commission's continued work on this, and I'm reminded of that adage, slow and steady wins the race. and that this is a really important issue to our members, and we want to make sure that we do this right. Having said that, we do believe that this is such a complex matter that it's not going to be solved at a commission meeting, and that it probably will require a lot of really smart people with a varied experience coming together to really work through some of these things and bring something back. Having said that, we would like to offer our cooperation in that we have a lot of members that are serving in this capacity that have an incredible amount of knowledge, and they're in this field working in schools with kids that could really bring that lens to the table, and I think that's really critical. While we understand that there are some things, here's the lane of the commission, and that there are sometimes things outside of our purview, but those things outside of the purview of the commission really impact the work of someone in that position. So we would encourage whatever type of work group is amassed that there be some teacher representatives that are practicing in schools now. Also understanding that in career and technical ed, there are a variety of industry sectors. So having a variety of teachers from those different industry sectors would bring different information to the table too, because what impacts one industry sector might not be the same as another. So given that complexity, we know a lot of teachers in a lot of industry sectors, and they would love to collaborate on this issue. There are some concerns that have come forward from our Adult Career and Technical Ed Committee at our State Council, and those concerns revolve around industry experience. And I know that's something that has been brought up before. Also, from some of our general educators have concerns about general ed teachers going into the career and technical ed and vice versa. So I guess the reciprocity kind of issues that might come up with that. So we believe that having teachers on that workforce from the different industry sectors will really help sort out those concerns and address them. So we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you so much.
Commissioners, questions, comments on this item? Commissioner Klatt, followed by Commissioner Brown.
First of all, I want to say how excited I am about this item. This is an issue near and dear to my heart, and I know we've talked a lot about it, and this is very promising, and I'm just very excited about it. I want to bring up maybe two potential questions. Those questions, by the way, are very exhaustive. There's a lot of thinking I can tell went into those questions, and I want to either add 2 points, or at least maybe they're in there and I just didn't see them. One, I didn't see a question that addressed the geography of the state and how some of these programs might be available to teachers and the students that they serve in some of our rural areas that might not be geographically close to a particular industry. And so what are the challenges faced in those situations in some of the corners of our state? And the other question is, I think that there is work being done in a lot of different places already, and I'm thinking of like the California Partnership Academies, I'm thinking of some charter schools, programs like Project Lead the Way and things like that, where people are having to find innovative ways to make this happen because of the challenges of credentialing. And so in those questions, is there a place to seek out programs that are doing some really innovative things and see how we can learn from those programs that are already happening? And I'm thinking, and I totally understand the dilemma that has come up when we've discussed this in the past between wanting to make it so that teachers can get these authorizations and that the industry wanting to ensure the high standard and the work hours and all of that. And so trying to find that balance. And I think there might be ways to, I'm thinking of some of these programs where the teacher on record has really strong collaborations with the industry and is, I'm thinking like in CPA, I think there's a requirement that you have a steering committee of industry who's steering that academy. So even though that teacher might not have had all of those hours of industry experience, their program is being directed by people who have. And so trying to find ways, and I think I saw something about bridges in here, and maybe that's where that question is going. But this is so exciting, and I'm really looking forward to what this group can find out. So thank you.
Commissioner Brown.
I echo the enthusiasm of looking at career tech education, and as the commissioner with the community college system, I think one of the largest teacher workforces of career tech education is currently teaching in the community colleges. And many of the students that they're teaching do in fact come from high schools in the way of dual enrollment and middle college. And I would hope that as I'm thinking about this, as the special ed work that was done, as the early childhood work is being done, that 360-degree view that you're talking about significantly includes CTE workforce that is currently teaching students from industry. And your description of some of the innovations, it is standard in CTE work at the community colleges that we have joint advisory industry and academic groups that meet regularly. So that piece to connect that up is really important. And I know as a member of the community college and actually in one of these sectors, teaching in one of these sectors, that's a really strong piece of community college. So I would really hope to see that here as well as the teacher reps that were mentioned.
Commissioner Grinnell-Shire.
I echo my colleagues' enthusiasm for this proposal, and I want to thank WestEd for coming to the table and partnering on this really, really important work. I think the work group is a very wise way to go. I have several dean colleagues who are also really excited, and I would be recommending some names to Terry later. But a couple of questions that came up just for this broader audience. Catherine, Commissioner Brown mentioned it, and one is that the collaboration has to include not only community colleges and offices of education, county offices of education, in addition to the partners that were listed here. And then a specific request, if the data could include regional data as well as statewide data, because that will vary across the state. But I'll be forwarding this to Terry right now. So thank you again for the work. We look forward to seeing some progress here.
Commissioners, this is an information action item. We can take a motion to direct staff to move forward with the proposed plan to collaborate with WestEd, CDE, and other stakeholders to address any or all questions identified in this agenda item. Staff would develop a work plan, move forward with this activity, and provide updates to the Commission. Or, as we've done in the past, just provide you that guidance. But if we want to put it in the form of a motion, we can. Question?
Regardless if we do a motion or just direct, is there a way to ensure that certain members are included, like our speakers were saying, teachers who are in the field and the people that Commissioner Grinnell-Shire also suggested, or do we have to put that in the motion, or can we just?
I don't think you have to put it in the motion. When we did the statewide special education task force, we worked with all the entities who were co-leading the group and came up with a broad representative group, and we've taken notes on the suggestions today, so we will attempt to follow those notes.
Commissioner Barnes?
I move to move forward with all the recommendations and collaborating with WestEd and including all the notes that they were given.
We have a motion. Commissioner Klatt, second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Schuler, Mr. Locks, Ms. Clark, and our representatives for this information. Due to the fantastic work this morning, we're going to take an early lunch. So we're going to break at 11:30. We'll see you at 12:30-ish. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. I'd like to call the educator preparation session back into order. Item 4F is update on work related to the child development permit. This item is being presented by Aaron Sullivan and Phyllis Jacobson. This is an information item. Ms. Sullivan, will you please begin?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today we are presenting an update on the work accomplished to date and that which is planned for the future around updating, improving, and strengthening the preparation of California's early care and learning workforce. This work began in 2015 with the Commission's Child Development Permit Advisory Panel. The panel examined the 6 levels of the child development permits that authorize individuals to serve in publicly funded early childhood education programs. The panel made a number of recommendations around the required coursework for candidates for a child development permit, the authorizations for the permits, and professional development requirements for permit renewals. The panel also reviewed and provided feedback on the first ever draft teaching performance expectations and program guidelines for the programs that prepare candidates for a child development permit. Several surveys were developed by Commission staff to obtain broad statewide stakeholder feedback on the panel's recommended permit changes and modifications, and on the draft teaching performance expectations and program guidelines. Response was overwhelming, with more than 1,200 individuals from across the ECE field responding. Staff and the chair of the panel presented an analysis of the panel recommendations and survey responses to the Commission at its February 2017 meeting. Following Commission direction from the February 2017 meeting, staff returned to the Commission in October 2017 with an additional draft set of performance expectations for the master teacher level of the permit. Staff recommended at that time that the Commission temporarily table any decision-making related to the panel's recommendations while staff explored further the development of draft performance expectations for all job levels of the permit and program guidelines. If the recommendations of the panel were to be adopted, the 6 levels of the permit would be reduced to 4, and those 4 would reflect the job roles of assisting, teaching, mentoring/coaching, and administrating. The table on pages 5 and 6 of your item provides a side-by-side comparison of these 4 job roles in the first column. Which of the current 6 levels of the child development permit reflect these job roles in the middle column, and on the right-hand column, the panel recommended child development permit structure. At the October 2017 meeting, staff presented a conceptual work plan for the development of a set of performance expectations for each of these 4 broad levels, program guidelines for preparers of the ECE workforce, potential quality assurance mechanisms for workforce preparation programs, and finally, revisiting the panel's recommendations to integrate permit recommendations, performance expectations, program guidelines, and any quality assurance mechanisms in order to form the foundation for a coherent, defensible structure for quality preparation and support of California's ECE workforce. At that October 2017 meeting, the Commission directed staff to develop a less conceptual, more specific set of activities and a timeline for proceeding with this work. That timeline, which is posted on page 2 of the item, was presented to the Commission at its February 2018 meeting. You will see on the timeline that staff has accomplished its set goals and is proceeding as planned. Over the course of the last couple of years, staff has also been engaged in parallel statewide effort to update and improve preparation for ECE professionals based on the recommendations from a report issued by the National Institute of Medicine and National Research Council. This report is titled Transforming the Workforce for Children from Birth Through Age 8, otherwise known as TWB8. This work is being supported in California by First 5 and the California Department of Education's Early Learning Division, and Commission staff have been participating in the California work group from its inception. The TWB8 work group had previously signaled its support of the Commission's ECE work and was amenable to inviting 3 additional ECE stakeholder representatives in order to create an augmented work group for the purposes of reviewing and providing feedback on a draft set of performance expectations and program guidelines. The members of this TWB8 Technical Advisory Work Group are listed in Appendix A on page 11. The augmented members included are actually the last 3 listed just above Phyllis and myself. They included the chair from the Child Development Permit Advisory Panel, Deborah Stipek, and also representation from Tri-C-ECE, which is the California Community Colleges Early Childhood Education Group, and the California Child Development Administrators Association. Now, if you will, allow me a moment, to say a word about performance expectations in this context. Prior to the work of the Child Development Permit Advisory Panel, the Commission's focus for the preparation of early childhood workforce has been on coursework. Child development permits are issued to candidates based on completion of specific courses within the context of a required minimum number of units. In other words, seat time. This is not reflective of the Commission's customary processes around credentialing, which involve establishing candidate competency and performance expectations and program standards in order to ensure the quality of candidate preparation. Therefore, the Commission, the workforce, and the preparers of the workforce are engaged in a significant shift in approach from the current system, but one that will more closely align the preparation of individuals who teach and care for California's very youngest learners with the preparation of individuals who teach and care for California's school-age learners, and also one that supports the work of the early childhood education stakeholders in moving toward greater professionalization. While the ECE performance expectations were inspired by and organized similarly to the California Standards for the Teaching Profession and the California Administrative Performance Expectations, their content has been informed by and aligned to multiple sets of standards and competencies for early childhood education. These include CDE's Preschool Learning Foundations and Curriculum Frameworks, the California Community Colleges Curriculum Alignment Project, the National Association of Educators of Young Children's Program Standards and Standards for Initial and Advanced Early Childhood Professional Preparation, and the competencies identified in the TWB8 report. Similarly, the draft program guidelines were inspired by the Commission's own teacher preparation program standards and then adapted to be applicable to ECE preparers. And so, as I previously mentioned, the work we are engaged in represents a significant shift in how we think about preparing early childhood education professionals. So as I hand the presentation over to Dr. Phyllis Jacobson, she's going to discuss, among other things, how we envision this shift taking place.
Thank you, Erin, and good afternoon, Commissioners. I, too, am delighted to be here talking with you about this topic, which has always been dear to my heart in my own professional career. On page 9 of your agenda item, there is a flow chart that illustrates the process that Erin just took you through and described. So I'm going to focus next on implementation of the steps to follow in this process. Once we have a final draft version of the performance expectations and the program guidelines, based on the public survey, which is now open, and the links to that are provided in your agenda item. We encourage you to make this information known. We would like as much broad input as we can get on these surveys. The next step will be to encourage preparers of the workforce to try out ways to transition to a competency and performance-based approach within coursework and fieldwork provided to permit candidates. That is a shift for programs in their thinking about how they approach this work. It might be helpful to this process to think back to the days when we were just implementing SB 2042, and we had a reason to encourage programs at that time to become what we called early adopters. And the early adopters received technical assistance from the Commission, and they provided feedback to the Commission about the implementation process, and they also helped to serve as examples and mentors, as it were, for other programs in their own transition to these standards. We've already received inquiries from some providers interested in becoming early adopters, so that's very encouraging for us. Another next step will be to consider appropriate mechanisms to verify the quality and consistency of implementation. Several potential avenues that we could explore could be, for example, working with the Curriculum Alignment Project, working with the CSU campuses that may not be affiliated with the CAP project, working with California members of the NAEYC, and other accredited preparers to get input on designing a workable and feasible system of quality assurance. We are in some hurry, however, to note that the Commission is neither funded nor staffed to include ECE preparation programs in the current accreditation system. So looking at other options to provide a more parallel approach seems more feasible to us at this point. So we are in the very beginning stages of these later parts of the work. For immediate work in 2018-19, we're presenting 3 primary tasks. These are shown on page 10 of the agenda item. And these 3 primary tasks for 18-19 would be to analyze the results of the field surveys that are currently out there, make any appropriate revisions, and return at the November 2018 Commission meeting with final draft versions of the performance expectations and program guidelines once these have been fully informed by all of the feedback that we're receiving. The second would be to inform the field about early adopter opportunities, provide technical assistance, and move forward with programs modifying their coursework and fieldwork to incorporate the teaching and or the administrator performance expectations, whichever are applicable to the particular preparation program. And the third major task for 18-19 would be to work with early adopters to help support program and course development, provide technical assistance, and collect feedback regarding the implementation of the TPEs and or the administrator performance expectations. So staff requests any further direction the Commission may have concerning the proposed work relating to the Child Development Permit. And this concludes our presentation, and we are, of course, happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Jacobson and Ms. Sullivan. I'd like to invite members of the public for comment. And first off, we have Dr. Sandra Moe. If you can please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Hello, is it working? Okay. I'm Dr. Sandra Moe, and I am a professor of early childhood education, child development at Rio Hondo College. I'm here today to represent the position statement on from Peach, and I'll let my colleague Jan Fish begin that, and then I'll add to it. You have the document in front of you. Jan is going to talk about points 1 and 4, and I'm going to talk about points 2 and 3. Thank you very much, Sandra. Yes, good afternoon. Oh, am I on? Now I am. Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Jan Fish, and I am the co-lead consultant of PEACH, Partnerships for Education, Articulation, and Coordination Through Higher Education. A cross-sector ECE faculty collaborative in Los Angeles County and now in the Sacramento and the San Francisco Bay areas as well, funded to expand by Packard Foundation. We're here today to, first of all, say thank you to CTC and the CTC writers, Aaron and Phyllis, with whom we have had the pleasure of working on the development of the current TPEs, APEs, and to look at the APEs and the preparation program guidelines in our one last meeting. So we are quite aware of the multiple versions that they have had to deal with over and over and over again, and we are very impressed by the distance that each level has come over time. And we are here also to say that now that the 5 surveys and the 5 draft documents are out, and the survey will close July 13th, PEACH has turned to advertising, disseminating that information so that you get the maximum that one might expect. Because it's summer, it's a real challenge to get to people, both in the field and in higher ed, to respond, and in agencies even, because people take vacations like popcorn in any field, right? But what we've done so far in Peach is analyzed all the TPEs, the APEs, and the preparation program guidelines, PPGs, and then we put up a Zoom call on Monday that we archived. So at the bottom of the position statement is a web page that you can access the Zoom call that's archived, and it actually gives the links to the surveys and to the 5 documents. It also goes over the questionnaires because they're in SurveyMonkey and they only allow you to see one question at a time, 1 or 2, and you can't go back. So what we did was we made copies of all the questions so somebody could take the 5 and then fill them out, holistically, and then enter them when they went online. So we have also explicit documents, like a 1-pager with all the links on it, and also we've given you 2 addenda here that we've also given on that Zoom call too, and we refer continually to the CTC website and those links. So what was really exciting about having been on that technical advisory group, myself and Nancy Hurlbut from the TW Birth to 8, but also from Peach, was to see them when the drafts came out now, side by side by side. So what we did was we looked at them, all the 3 levels of teacher performance expectations side by side, to see the differences and the continuity across of the performance expectations that were being proposed. We also looked at the 6 standards that they're based on of the California Standards for Professional Teaching, and also we looked at the 12 competency areas in the ECE, the state's ECE competencies. And when we looked at that crosshatch of those areas, there were 6 of the 12 ECE areas of knowledge, skills, and dispositions developed in California by ECE stakeholders as a California Department of Ed document to inform the course of study that early childhood educators follow as they pursue study in institutions of higher ed, quote unquote. And we saw that 6 of them were covered in the 6 under the 6 standards, but that 6 of the areas of 12 or half, and they're listed here, were not significantly covered. They could be consistently covered, or they were missing from the draft TPEs and APEs. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to the back side of your sheet and talk about the preparation program guidelines, because the first 3 really refer to the TPEs as well. Because the preparation program guidelines, I know, are designed, because we've been told, to give guidance, provide guidance for preparers, but also let them develop their own flavor of program, how they're going to accomplish this. Those preparation program guidelines depend on the draft TPEs. And if the draft TPEs are lacking coverage or consistent coverage of 6 major competency areas out of 12 in the state's ECE competencies, we think we need further clarification and growth. We've got an incredible base, but we need further clarification and growth. And actually the parsing out of things and looking at the ECE competencies. Also, my colleague Sandra Moe will, Dr. Sandra Moe will give the update on the developmental progression, but what we've seen is in some items, exactly the same language was put together for the assistant, for the teacher, and for the master teacher mentor coach. The exact same language for a competency, which didn't give the preparation program guidelines the capacity to give guidance to preparers to prepare a scope and sequence of curriculum provided to the candidates, or the scope and the progression too, but the scope of pedagogical assignments over time. In terms of content areas, we totally want to call out that there needs to be a systematic inclusion of knowledge and skills related to the development of and learning of dual language learners and dual language children and their families. In the guideline 3 of the PPGs, the dual language status of a child is referred to as a learning need, which certainly any status, any characteristic could have learning needs to it. And yet we also need the strength side of it. What does that dual language learner bring to the community of children in that classroom, especially when 60 out of 40% of our children are dual language learners? That synergy and that richness of two languages and multiple cultures is critically important to elevate for us and for young children and their families. And the TPEs again cite supporting home language one time only and not supporting families in that reference. The APEs have only one reference to linguistic, and it's about program staff and supporting program staff, and no reference to dual language learning. The PPGs appear, at least to our review, to address the teacher performance expectations, but not the administrator performance expectations, making us ask, is there going to be another set of preparation program guidelines to be developed. We see this as an incredible move, and we see this work as incredibly important. We know, again, we applaud the CTC for its work. We know the potential double import that this work has for the CD permit and for any future ECE credential. It's setting up a structure. For that reason, it's doubly important that these TPEs, APEs, and PPGs reflect early childhood education and developmental goals as well as learning goals together for our children and families.
So if I could encourage you to go back to the front of your document to look at item 2. Here, item 2 addresses that progression that Jan mentioned. The TPEs and APEs must consistently reflect the progression in knowledge and skills across job role levels. And we can look at that in comparison with our ECE, Early Childhood Educators competencies. If you look at your attachment 2 on the front page, it says, as the CTC drafts are being reviewed by early childhood educators as individuals, what Peach would like to do is provide some specific examples of how those ECE education competencies and their competency context can enrich the development of the TPEs. So if you look on the back of that paper, here you have an example from Standard 1, Engaging and Supporting All Young Children in Learning, and you have the 3 levels of the TPEs, one for assisting teaching, one for teacher, and one for master teacher. And you can see that they're essentially the same TPE. But if you look at comparable levels in the ECE context, you look at supporting early learning and development, that would be the assistant teaching level. And here you have more detail and more differentiation in the 3 levels than you would in the TPEs above. So for example, under the supporting early learning and development, it says it tends to culturally diverse attributes of children and families. Then under the teacher TPEs, if you look the next step up, planning and guiding early learning and development is the context of the ECE competencies. Here it says works proactively to support children and families as they transition to the early childhood setting. And that's a step above what the assistant would do. Mm-hmm. And then if we were to look at the next context, this is at the teacher, mentor, coach level, that would be the context of creating and maintaining policy and program policies and procedures. In this level, they develop and implement policies and practices that promote inclusion of all children and families in the program. So you can see specific details of how that progresses as the job role changes. And so that's an important example of how we'd like to see it align more specifically and in more detail with the competencies. If you go back to, then again, our position statement under 2, we also wanted to make sure that we clarify that the master teacher level and the administrator level need to indicate that those master teachers and those administrators can do the same things we're expecting the assistant and the teacher to do, because how can you supervise if you don't understand the job role of the people you're supervising? Then number 3 would be the last one that I'm doing. This is the importance of play in early childhood. Children's play in ECE programs is a consistent core contextual component for all activities and learning. It's the basic format of what we do. And so play is cited 3 times in the TPEs as children's play, as a teacher-guided, children-centered, intentional learning opportunity, incorporate child-initiated and teacher-guided play interactions, and implementing learning experiences that are developmentally appropriate, engaging, and playful. Reflecting confusing and incomplete concepts of the nature and power of children's play in development and learning. So we're very excited about what's been done so far, and we'd just like to deepen and broaden the context of that. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
And I would just like to cite that we have been in collaboration with Early Edge, who's presenting today, with Californians Together, and also with CCDAA, with whom we presented to the Child Care Planning Committee of LA County last week. We really appreciate this opportunity, and thank you again for all of your work.
Thank you, Dr. Moe. Dr. Fish?
Thank
you. Carolyn Crolette. Please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Crolette. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst with Early Edge California. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment on the important work that you're all doing around the child development permit. Your efforts will help shape the field of early childhood for many years to come. Thank you. So Early Edge California would like to share some important overarching points for the Commission to consider in this work. First of all, we recommend that the CTC do more to ensure that the state's current research-based ECE competencies be more strongly embedded in all of the work related to this child development permit. The ECE competencies are comprehensive, research-based, and also support developmentally appropriate practice for children. That said, with respect to the ECE competencies related to culture, diversity, and equity, and also dual language development, they are insufficiently addressed in the proposed TPEs and guidelines. Research demonstrates the important role that the home language plays in the development of English, as well as the cognitive and socio-emotional benefits of home language development. Given the fact that 60% of the children in our state speak a language other than English at home, further attention needs to be given on how to prepare early educators to meet the needs of this population. Furthermore, the voters of California have spoken through the passage of Proposition 58, demonstrating through the overwhelming 73.5 majority vote that bilingualism is embraced and seen as a clear advantage for all of our state's children. As a result, policy regarding supporting English and dual language learners in the state has shifted, as the state's EL roadmap has been developed and is currently being implemented. We recommend, therefore, that the CTC's, TPEs, and APEs be modified to better align with the policy outlined in the EL roadmap. Specifically for dual language learners, there must be more language in the TPEs and the program guidelines that explicitly support the continued development of children's home language. The only reference is in Standard 4, which states, describe appropriate strategies for supporting home language for the youngest learners. However, there is no language about actually being able to implement those strategies, and also it is unclear which age group is meant by youngest learners. Secondly, there needs to be additional language specific to supporting infants and toddlers. This age group obviously has different needs than older children. In the current draft, there are only a few standards that specifically call out and distinguish the needs of this age group. Thirdly, echoing what Peach just shared, the TPEs can benefit if there is a developmental progression of competencies across job roles and functions. This will provide a better roadmap for the profession and more likely result in guidelines that support the preparation programs. Lastly, there should be deeper, more complex practicum experiences with an emphasis on demonstration of candidates' skills within ECE program settings, working with children and adults. This will help ensure that teachers are progressing and achieving higher quality. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide feedback, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Corlett. Commissioners, any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Zeppelin.
So I'd like to applaud you. I know that the private nonprofit institutions are very excited about this and really look forward to the work continuing, and also want to learn more about the early adopter period. So are you able to provide any clarity? Obviously, that the survey's out and TPEs are getting modeled. What might the IHE groups be able to do during this time to get ready for the early adopter period?
One of the things that they can do is participate in the survey, and in that manner become much more familiar with what these competencies are and what the program guidelines are. In some ways, institutions that have been part of the accreditation system and that are familiar with these processes may be more ready to move forward in a faster manner than others, because they're familiar with how the TPEs work, with how the APEs work, with how program guidelines leave a lot of room for programs to develop their own approaches to meeting these standards. They're not intended to be prescriptive documents that tell you how you must do what. And so part of our work is helping programs understand that so that they're ready to think about how to implement these within their current program structure and then move their curriculum and their faculty towards better understanding of the Commission's systems. I still think we have quite a bit of work to do with helping people become more familiar with how the Commission does its work. At the same time, I want to applaud the input from all of those people who have come and spoken to us today, because it helps us understand how better to work with the community and try to make these performance expectations meet everybody's expectations, for lack of a better term. This is a wonderful process, and as Erin said in the beginning of her presentation today, we haven't worked as closely with this community as we have with some of the others that are more familiar with the Commission's work. So this, for me, it's very exciting and encouraging to hear these people come forward and express their opinions. But in order to move forward, we want people to become familiar with these, and then we're going to provide opportunities for them to discuss with us how best they can move forward. There are some organizations in the field that are ready to do this work with us, and they've been doing this work for some time. The Curriculum Alignment Project is very familiar with processes of revising curriculum and helping institutions look at their own curriculum and move forward with implementation. The CSU, of course, has many systems within it to help institutions help each other to move forward. We don't have a roadmap, to borrow that term as well. We don't have a specific roadmap at this point. This is work that we're going to be doing in 1718. So we're making information available, or we will be making information available to programs about this opportunity to work with us.
So follow up to that. So I think one specific question is, so is a next step then to revise the permit with integrating the TPEs and so influencing the TPEs accordingly? And just a statement that I know I heard loud and clear from many of our institutions is the hope here is that we get towards an easy credential over time and realize that this is a building block towards getting there. But in the outline of the levels, and particularly with assisting, the hope if we're raising the level of professionalism in early childhood, it would seem that assisting would better correlate with an associate's degree, teaching with a bachelor's, master teaching a bachelor's plus, and then administrating towards a master's degree. So just a comment as well as, more clarity on the next steps of revising the permit and so forth.
For we're in 1718, right? For 1819, we're proposing to move forward with the plan that's presented in this agenda item. Certainly, reconsideration of the the Child Development Advisory Permit panel's recommendations will be forthcoming at some point in the future. We're doing building blocks right now to support the infrastructure that could then be applied towards the Commission's consideration or further consideration of the recommendations made by the Child Development Permit Advisory Panel. So these are building block steps, and we're in the building phase of those steps.
Commissioner Brown, I was just waiting.
So much to say about such little children that make so much difference in the lives of our state and our families. I can't thank you enough for taking this on and walking the path with us, because we're creating this together. It's even bigger than the work that we did with special ed, because what we're trying to do now is to bring into teacher preparation and into public education an area of child rearing and educational experiences that are more diverse than any other area of education and teaching. That being said, it's really exciting to do this. It's time to do it. This state ought to be doing it, and we ought to be able to educate and determine what those things are that it takes to educate our youngest learners, as you said. It's really hard to develop a coherent and defensible structure. I do have some concerns. I share the concerns, and I appreciate you both, all three of you, coming up to the mic about then trying to take this first step, which is to identify 4 levels and to describe the performance expectations that are needed to a field that's never had them. And also to a field that would love to be able to require a credential. But frankly, when you make minimum wage as an assistant teacher, it's unrealistic to require that you get an associate degree or higher. And I'm really sorry about that. At the same time, I think my concerns have to do with making sure that these descriptions of these levels is progressive. And I think that your speakers brought up some things that needs some more work. The field will weigh in as well. But the timing is tricky. And I also heard that going in and trying to give feedback is tricky. So I want us to think about that so that we can do the work that we need to have this body described well enough to pilot it, to have early adopters or piloting. My second concern is the timing. And this is funny for me to do because I've been pushing for this to go faster. But my concern is if we're still looking at this at the beginning, right now, this is our first look at it, and the field's weighing in right now, that to try to get people to start implementing documents that haven't been fully vetted might be going a little bit too fast. I'd like to have the documents in pretty good shape before we try to implement them, because as someone who's in an institution of higher education, if we're going to start to revise curriculum content, if we're going to start to look at revising certificates and degrees, if that's what is moving down, that's a big deal. So I don't want us to be building that new first-time early childhood education preparation system on something that hasn't been fully vetted yet. So that's my second concern. And I would love to see us be able to, I think the work that's been done around transforming the workforce and the competencies and the NAEYC standards is also spot on. But again, that makes it complex and tricky to put together. And I think one of the things that the California early childhood competencies have done, you don't need to know them, they're incredibly detailed. But one of the things they do help with is some of the specific examples of what those key things need to be. So I think there's ways that we could do that. So again, I'll stop now, but my two concerns is that the documents aren't consistent enough across these 4 levels. I think we need to finish the full vetting before we move on to the pilot, or we may be having people do pilot work on stuff that's a little bit shaky ground.
Thank you. Chair Darling-Hammond.
Well, I was waiting for Kate to speak first because I knew she's been waiting for this for a long time. and we're all thrilled to see the progress that's being made and really appreciate the work of all the staff and the advisors who've been involved in it. I agree with the point that Commissioner Brown just made, that it sounds like there's a little bit of work to be sure that the early childhood competencies are fully baked in the right ways and across the continuum before we do piloting. So I feel the same way, that we've been eager for this, but we should make sure that we keep it in order, that we do a little bit more of that work and then launch pilots. The other thing that I was reflecting on is that we have a workforce in early childhood of all kinds of people doing all kinds of different work in all kinds of settings who will want to acquire additional knowledge and skill for that work, and who already have done some pieces of the work in their child development permit structure, which was based on credits. And we may need to anticipate the need for some kind of a transcript review component that allows people to continue to aggregate courses, sometimes one by one, over time, added to what they've already got, so that people can make progress toward the new standards. So I would just put that thought in our collective minds as we're moving from a credit-based system to a programmatic, competency-based system, that we need some kind of a transition plan that recognizes the efforts that people have already made and will continue to make to build their knowledge and skills piece by piece, course by course, in that new framework, hopefully.
I'm happy that you brought that up, because it gives me another opportunity to say publicly to all the folks that I hope are watching this, that indeed there will be a transition plan created. It's part of what the Commission does anytime we make major changes, which, you're all aware, as we've been implementing some new changes to our own standards for the K-12 educators and TPEs. It is something that the field continues to be very nervous about, and I appreciate having an opportunity to say again publicly that individuals who hold documents will be able to continue to hold those documents, and that individuals who are sort of mid-course in their programs, that there will be a transition timeline available to them so that they can finish what they started in a reasonable amount of time. So thank you for that.
Any further questions or comments, commissioners? Ms. Sullivan, Dr. Jacobson, you have enough information to move forward. We look forward to hearing back from you in November. Thank you. Having no additional items for today, I recess the Educator Preparation Committee.
We're going to continue right along to the Professional Practices Committee. Commissioner Cooney, will you please convene the committee? And then we'll see. We are
Good afternoon, everyone. This will be really stimulating, so if you're having trouble after lunch, no problem. At the end of this, you'll be ready to go. I'll call, yeah, more importantly, I will call to order the Professional Practices Committee, and as usual, we have information to share with commissioners regarding our workload report. I'm sure you all recall, because we've said it over and over again, this practice of reviewing our workload report at the commission level stemmed from a recommendation of the state auditor in 2011. I was here on the commission, remember being admonished that we should pay attention to these numbers, and we have ever since. So, and as our executive director indicated, we have some good news in terms of our trends. This is for information only. I will ask Gil Gonzalez from the division to give the report today. Good afternoon, Mr. Gonzalez.
Good afternoon. I'll try to keep you guys awake. I'll be presenting the division's monthly workload report. The report contains 6 measurements for both current and prior year numbers for comparisons purposes, and I'll include some main numbers that we currently have. The total cases that are open within DPP. This includes cases in the intake unit, before the Committee of Credentials, before the Commission, and at administrative hearing, is currently at 2810. Well, as of April was at 2810, which is within the normal range of 26 to 2800, but far above the normal range that we previously had, which was 24 to 26. As of May, we reduced that caseload back to 2750. Cases open are those cases that we received during the month from all sources, including criminal arrest notifications, district reports, affidavits, etc. In April, we opened 453, and in May, we opened 488, which is both within the range of the 400 to 500 cases. As can be seen from the two graphs, initial review cases and formal review cases, the committee continually continues to effectively handle a large number of cases under consideration. We've recently increased that number from 90 to approximately 98 to 100 that we're doing on a monthly basis. Cases closed during the month of April. We closed 377 cases and 548 in May. AG cases refer to cases in which an educator requests an administrative hearing to challenge any recommendation for discipline made by the committee. As of April, the number was 232. At the end of May was 219, and as of today is 207. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Before I ask my fellow commissioners for questions, could you just explain the initial total cases numbers? How does the commission get its cases in general?
We receive notifications from school districts. Those are school district cases, of course. Applicants who disclose information to us as far as background issues that they may have, rap sheets and or public complaints the main types of cases that we receive.
And when you mention rap sheets, is this the result of the fingerprints?
Correct. Fingerprints and arrest notifications from that are reported by DOJ.
Okay, so the important point I've learned is that these are not just cases coming from the existing teacher population, but also those who would aspire to become teachers.
Correct. First time applicants too. Right.
In terms of general broad percentages, how many of the total cases are based on those applications versus those who are teachers currently employed throughout the state?
I don't have current numbers, and I wouldn't want to guess, but the majority of our cases right now are being opened based on applicants and applicant app wraps. What we consider app wraps are reports made by those individuals who are reporting their misconduct and have criminal conduct. So if we receive notification from two different agencies or individuals, that's what we consider an app wrap.
Of course.
Are we talking about people who are applying to become teachers? They're doing their very first applications for the...
We have a category that's called the first-time applicant, right? And then we have another category called holders, and those are individuals who are currently holding and may have had a misstep, some kind of criminal action or a school district case or something like that.
So I was just trying to figure out if what the import of what you're saying is that most of the cases that are being brought are not current teachers, but people who are applying to become teachers. What you were saying?
What I'm saying is that we currently have the majority of the cases that are being open are based on applicants, and that could be past holders, right? Current or past holders too.
Of credentials, but
right.
Past holders being re-entrants who have left the teaching force and are coming back in?
Can be both. That could be current holders and past holders that are coming back in.
But who are not currently teaching?
Some that are currently teaching, right? They could be both. Current holders and past holders.
Right.
They're coming back.
I guess I was asking, are the majority of the cases coming through for people who are not currently teaching? That's what I thought I was.
Well, they're categorized into different. We categorize them differently, and those stats that we do on an annual basis. So right now, my guesstimate is that most of them are based on applicants, and we've had an increase of those coming in, and that could be first-time applicants and/or holders that are either getting a renewal type document.
Thank you.
Sure. Sorry about that.
So what I'm driving at, and I think the other commissioners would benefit from hearing, is we have this fire hose, and the division is receiving a whole lot of input into the fire hose. Right. And what seems more complicated than we understand is what types fit within the definition of applicants. Because you've indicated there are more applicants coming in for review than there are existing holders, right?
Right. A lot of our cases are based on applicant type, right?
Is there a difference in the amount of time and effort that comes in considering either one of those categories?
We have a lot of individuals who, when they apply, they don't submit all the documentation that they need to. So that tends to hold up cases. So we're constantly requesting that they do follow the procedure, which is when you apply, submit your documentation, and it'll make the process go faster. Otherwise, staff on our end, we're trying to help out gathering those docs. So that tends to delay the process.
So just to bring it into the current action, we rely heavily on the Committee of Credentials to review this great volume of material that comes through the fire hose. And are they looking at those first-time applicants as well, or maybe prior holders that are reapplying?
Yeah, they do look at the majority of the cases, right?
And so among the 100 or so cases they consider every month are these first-time applicants.
Yes, they can be looking at them at different levels, right?
Okay. I'm not trying to cross-examine, but
okay. It's a very complicated system that we have, and it's multi-step. So, it's hard to
what I
explain
guess I'm
sometimes.
saying is behind these statistics that you so carefully prepare for us every single month,
right.
There's a whole lot of work, and I think it's important for us to understand where the work is coming from, how it's dealt with, and we end up with this tiny fraction that we actually see, and some of those cases alarm us, and the history is important to us. So I appreciate the extra input, and I know we have some commissioners that haven't been doing it for too long, and it's of course instructive, and I feel like I've been doing it a long time and still am learning every single time. Any questions or other elaboration? Oh yes, Commissioner Sloan.
I am very interested in this conversation that we've been having. I think we're trying to understand the difference between cases that involve teachers who might be currently teaching in a classroom versus cases that involve people who are just applying to come into the profession.
Right.
And I think that is a very important distinction for the profession to understand, or at least for the information that we put out into the world.
Right.
And if there was a way to have that a little bit more visible, that would...
We do that in our annual stats.
Just in the annual, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Our General Counsel, Ms. Whitnell, you have some input for us?
I do, and what I'm looking at is actually something, I will send you some statistics to answer your question. I want to point out, we ran the numbers as to applicants, applicant holders, and first-time applicants, because I know Dr. Sandy has been very interested in this issue as well. So I'm looking at a chart which I am happy to make public and send out to you. These are the numbers that we have ran. For 2017-18, the number of new cases that were opened for applicants in our unit as to misconduct was 546. And the number where they are an applicant and they also hold a credential, so that means they're applying for something else, was 321. And for first-time applicants with misconduct, the number was 2,653. And that's for the 17-18 fiscal year. And I can provide you with numbers going back 6 years. I'm happy to distribute this chart to you. And the projections are as of March 8, 2018. So we haven't finished the fiscal year, but the numbers are very, very telling, and I'm happy to send those numbers to you.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
I think that's very telling, and I think it's getting at some of the interests that we have. What it suggests is that the system is catching people about whom there may be concerns before they even get to the classroom, which is a successful thing to be doing. That is to say, it also reflects on, as these numbers go out into the field, people draw conclusions about the nature of the teaching force and who's teaching our children. And I think understanding that many of these cases that are being pursued are not people who are currently teaching our children, but for whom flags are going up before that happens, is very important in how the public thinks about its teaching force, as well as how it understands the work that the Commission is doing on behalf of kids. So thank you very much for sharing the numbers, and however we can highlight those understandings would be, I think, very helpful.
One more thing.
Executive Director Sandy.
Related to that is that we are stimulating and have been stimulating for a little while now recruitment and growth in the sector that represents the largest sector of our of the applications we open. So I know that the General Counsel has raised this previously relative to our workload, that we have seen an uptick in what's coming into DPP for processing, and we expect that to continue. So just, further interesting factoids.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Is any of this data housed on our dashboard, or are there any plans to include it as part of our dashboard?
The data that I just presented to you was data that we developed, was it April? In April. So we ran this at the end of March. We developed it for April. Because we anticipate staffing needs for our unit, we're seeing a very large increase in applications, which, as you can see, is increasing the work of the Committee of Credentials. They're now seeing up to 100 cases. Our system is at max capacity, so what we're trying to look at are solutions for how do we keep operating, avoid backlog, and also still give each of these first-time applicant cases due diligence, not letting people slip through the cracks. So we ran them specifically to look at what our staffing needs would be, but we can include them in this workload report if that's something you're interested in seeing.
I think that's what I'm hearing, and certainly personally would like to see that breakdown. Your workload is our workload, and we're responsible for it. And I think that's the message here. Years ago, long before Executive Director Sandy was a part of the commission, we had problems with not knowing at the commission level what was going on with the workload of the professional practices division. So we don't want those days to return, and the more data we can get, we're interested in the same things you are. You feel you need more staff. I think if we express that in our committee meetings, that can only help your situation. So I think it's good for everyone if we just dive a little deeper than we have with the statistics that you've presented monthly or every time we meet.
We're happy to do that. Mr. Gonzalez is our data person. He can do a lot of queries to extract many types of information. So what I'll do is I'll go back and look at what we did in April, and I'll find out what types of information are relevant to you. If you could send me by email any suggestions that you would like to see in the workload report, I'm happy to incorporate those in if we're able to do those queries.
Great. Yes. Commissioner Hine.
This conversation's got me thinking about, not to add another big thing, but just cases that are not being reported. So while we have superintendents are mandated to report, when they don't report, how do we get that information? And maybe something that we could start thinking about down the line is how can we hold districts accountable for reporting more than just a fine for the superintendent for not reporting, because that doesn't seem to be working to the full intent of the bill. But maybe districts could be, in part of their reporting tests that they do for other things, need to include how many cases did they open for, what were the cases that should have been reported, like just a spreadsheet or something, so that it kind of reminds them that they also need to report. Because the worst thing that can happen is if we have somebody actually in the classroom who shouldn't be in the classroom, and then that comes back on us, and it doesn't matter all this other good work that we're doing, because if one bad case, presented to the public just makes the profession look horrible, and it is horrible for kids to be in a classroom with that. So I don't know how that would look, and that's a lot more work, but just something to think about. Something I think about often. So.
Anything else?
Okay. I just wanted to add that our dashboard report is on on the educator website, on the DPP website page.
The CTC website?
On the DPP educator misconduct page.
Oh, okay. And that's available to the public?
Right.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. I didn't mean to make the report, your very loyal report, longer, but when you think what's behind these numbers, these are real issues that the profession faces and that our responsibility covers.
Sure, not a problem.
Thank you both for filling in the blanks. Okay, that's all we had for the Professional Practices Committee. if there's nothing further, we will adjourn.
Thank you for making it so scintillating, as promised. And we're going to go on to the Legislative Committee. Commissioner Hind, will you please convene the committee?
All right. I now convene the June 2018 meeting of the Legislative Committee. The committee has one item before it today. Item 7A is status of legislation. This is an information item. Joshua Speaks will present this item. Mr. Speaks, please begin.
Thank you, Commissioners. As usual, I want to start by just sort of orienting you as to where we are in the legislative session. You heard about the budget a little bit earlier today, so you know about the timelines there. And the legislature has until July 6th to hear and pass any remaining bills out of their appropriate policy committees, and then summer recess will begin upon adjournment on July 6th. So I'd like to then start with the Commission's two pieces of sponsored legislation, and we have some bad news on the first of those pieces of sponsored legislation, AB 3048, our teacher assignment monitoring bill, which was authored for us by Assemblymember Irwin, was held on suspense in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. And essentially what that means is that the bill is dead for the year. So when a bill goes to the Appropriations Committee, if it has a cost associated with it, they hold it in that committee until they get all of the bills that have a fiscal cost associated with them. And then that way they can do sort of a global look at all of the expenses that the state might be incurring through legislation, and they choose which bills to release and which bills not to release. And so as part of our stakeholder process, and then as part of our process of getting it through the Assembly Education Committee, one of the things that we had to do at the request of the chair of the Assembly Education Committee was include charter schools in our existing assignment monitoring process. And so when it went to the Appropriations Committee, in addition to the minor expenses associated with the bill itself, there were concerns about sort of unanticipated and as of yet uncalculated expenses associated with wrapping in charter schools, which, you know, up to this point have not been part of the statewide assignment monitoring process. And so because of those concerns, the bill was held on suspense. However, we've taken some key components of the bill, primarily around the authority to share data between ourselves and the Department of Education, and that language was included in the budget bill. In addition to that, as part of the budget bill, one of our BCPs was for additional funding to create a new database for assignment monitoring, and that was approved, and that was included in the budget as well. So we do have some building blocks that we were able to take out of this bill, and then we have the funding that was part of our budget proposals for the year. And using that, we are able to move forward with some pieces of this process so that I think we'll be well positioned to have more data on potential costs and things like that next year if the commissioners choose to pick this proposal back up and have us run with it again next year. With that, we also have SB 1383, which is our Committee of Credential bills, and that bill is moving apace. It is currently scheduled to be heard in the Assembly Education Committee on June 27th, and so we're having some conversations with the Ed Committee Chair and his staff getting ready for that hearing. In fact, I was just answering some questions for them on that bill earlier today. Oh, sorry about that. So we are in conversations with the chair of the Assembly Ed Committee in anticipation of that hearing on June 27th. In fact, I was speaking to his staff a little bit earlier today, so they're currently working on their analysis for that bill. Having said that, there were just a couple of highlights on other bills of interest to the Commission that I wanted to go over real briefly. The first is AB 2186. There's actually a couple bills, and I'll just preface mentioning them by name with saying that in addition to the grant money that was discussed and approved in the budget, there were several bills that sought to create new grant programs. And while those bills are still alive legislatively, they were not allocated any money in the budget. And so if they were to pass the whole legislative process and become law, essentially the language sits there, and the grant program has the legal authority to exist, but until there's funding allocated in a budget or in a future piece of legislation, nothing further will happen with the program. And so the bills that are in that sort of limbo status are AB 2186, Assemblymember Thurman's bill that would create a Golden State STEM teacher grant program, SB 1214, which is a bill by Assemblymember Portantino, which would allow teachers to deduct qualified professional development expenses, which basically their induction expenses when they are doing their income taxes. And then I believe there's, and then AB 2547 by Assemblymember McCarty, which would create the California Teacher Corps Act of 2018, which would be another teacher residency program. So all three of those bills are still in process. They're moving through their committees, and they're showing good legislative support. But if they were to be enacted, the commission wouldn't actually be able to do anything with those programs, or in this state franchise tax board in the case of the tax deduction bill, until there's actually funding allocated to make the programs happen. Other than that, the only other bill that I wanted to highlight was AB 3149 by Assemblymember Limon. As you probably recall from previous meetings, that bill would have extended the time that substitutes were allowed to remain in the classroom to 60 days for general ed and 50 days for special ed. And the bill has since been amended to instruct the commission to hold a stakeholder process to determine whether or not there's a need to provide expanded pathways for 30-day sub-permit holders who are otherwise qualified to receive a TPSL permit. And so essentially that was a process that our certification division was already engaged in. When they go out and when they have meetings with credentialing folks, because the TPSL is a new permit, they were already sort of having discussions with those folks about, hey, how do you see the TPSL? What are you thinking about it? And so if this bill passes, it will just formalize something that the commission was already doing on its own. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. We have one public comment card. Jenny Teresi, if you please come up and state your name and affiliation for the record.
Jenny Teresi. I'm speaking on behalf of the Credentials Networking Subcommittee of PASCO, which is a subcommittee of the Superintendent's Organization, CSESA. I wanted to just address AB 3048, the assignment monitoring bill, which is not going forward at this point. But I wanted to thank Josh in particular and the Commission for including us in those stakeholder discussions. And I felt like a lot was accomplished. And so regardless, I mean, I know it's not going forward right now, but we appreciated all that opportunity to give our input in that work that we do, which consumes half of my time during a school year. And it was just very considerate and very helpful, I think, for us to understand what was trying to be accomplished and how that might impact the field. So thank you for all allowing us to be part of that conversation. We look forward to moving that forward in the future.
Thank you. I have no other public comment cards. Commissioners, do you have any? Commissioner Greeno-Shire and then Commissioner Cooney.
I wanted to comment on the agenda item description of Senate Bill 577. The way it is written, one may think that in fact it's a bill to support teacher preparation at the community colleges, and this bill came before us a year and a half or so ago and resulted in lots of rich conversation about how we prepare teachers in California, and what's the role of the 2-year institution and the 4-year institution. I've been particularly close to this bill working with our government and relations staff here in Sacramento, as well as with Senator Dodd's staff, and I just wanted to clarify that the intent is that this is a partnership between the 2-year community college system and 4-year institutions. And while I had originally wanted to just include CSUs, I was compelled to support our other partners, and so the language reflects that as well. So I just want to make sure that if folks haven't had a chance to look at the actual amendments, the amendment I'm looking at is June 11, 2018. And while originally it was Community College District's Teacher Credentialing Programs of Professional Preparation, it is now California Community College Teacher Credentialing Partnership Pilot Program. And I think that partnership is really, really important to emphasize to the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooney?
Just a clarification. Mr. speaks on one of the acronyms you used. Was it THISL? I just didn't know what that reference was.
TPSL, I apologize.
TPSL.
Teaching Permit for Statutory Leave. It's a newer permit that the Commission created about 2 years ago now, I believe, that authorizes a person to substitute teach for the entire duration of a teacher's time on a statutory leave, like if you're a maternity leave or medical leave, that sort of thing.
So a long-term substitute.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Klatt?
I have 2 bills I wanted to comment on. The first is AB 3048, and I realize it's being held on suspense, so my comments might be a moot point, but in case it does come back, I just would like to express a comment or a concern. I think the bill originally was about this technological upgrade to the system that seems really needed, and then the charter issue got put into it, and that's the part that concerns me. I understand the need for charter accountability. Definitely, it's an important issue, but I feel like we're trying to wedge into this bill a charter oversight problem when that's not necessarily a reporting issue. I think if we look at teacher qualifications as part of the charter agreement, the charter law gives flexibility to charters. And when the charter gets approved, the oversight, whatever entity is providing the oversight, is responsible for that oversight and ensuring that the school is employing teachers who are qualified as the charter would stipulate. So my concern is if charters are part of this reporting, I can kind of see one of 2 scenarios happening. Either as a commission, we apply the same criteria to charters as we do to traditional public schools, in which case I think the data will be not very useful because I think it'll show a lot of misassignments that aren't really misassignments because they're part of the charter. Or if we don't apply the traditional schools requirements, it would require the commission to somehow figure out what are sometimes very complex and very unique situations. And I'm not sure, and that seems like to try to report that accurately seems like it would be a lot of staff work. And it could get really into some weeds in those charters. So I'm really concerned about how those numbers would appear and how we would even figure those things out. I definitely think that as a state, we need more resources and more support for charter authorizers, whether it's at the local level, the county level, or the state level, in terms of how to ensure good oversight that keeps the right teachers in those jobs. I'm just worried that this bill seemed like the wrong place to put that. And so I have a concern if it comes back, what that really would look like to have the commission have to determine the assignment monitoring for charter schools. So that's one bill. And then I also wanted to comment on kind of a different note on AB 169, which I think is also, that's another one that looks like it's being held up. The funding, and this is just perhaps more anecdotal than anything else, but after our last meeting, I went back to I teach juniors, high school juniors, and asked them, how many of you because we'd had the item on our agenda last time about teacher supply. And I asked them how many of them are considering becoming teachers. And I got a lot of eye rolls and a lot of like, oh, why would I want to do that? You don't get paid. There's no respect. I got, kind of this list of things. And then I actually had them read an article that came out after our meeting that looked at the diversity of the teaching force in California. And we had a really great discussion. I had them read and analyze the article. We talked about the importance of representation in the workforce. And I think there were a lot of students, and these are juniors who are starting to think about college, who it really, I think, had a lot of frustration and anger that they didn't see themselves in their teachers. And they were just angry about it. And we talked about, well, why is that? And why aren't some of you wanting to become teachers? And I think we have this captive audience in the K-12 system. And I don't know that we do a good enough job promoting our own career. So I know this is I'm taking a long aside here. But when I asked them to come up with solutions, I said, I'm going to go back to the meeting next, in 2 months. What would you like me to share about what would help you? And even consider being a teacher. And it came back to grants. Like that was their number one suggestion, was if there were ways to help us pay for college, we would definitely consider teaching as a career. And these were kids that at the beginning of the conversation were like, But when we talked about that option, it really was, it seemed to change them. So I would hope that we continue to support efforts to both target high school students early, but also get these grants and get these incentives for them to want to become teachers. So sorry, that was a little bit of a soapbox, sorry.
So to just briefly comment on that piece of it, I think the data shows that the very groups that we're concerned about being underrepresented in the teaching workforce are also some of the same groups that have the least availability of financial resources and the least ability to sort of take those financial risks and get a college loan and things like that. And so I think you're dead on that. It's a really key part of that particular problem. As far as our sponsored legislation goes and the issue of charter schools, I don't think it's speaking out of turn to say that it was not our first choice to include charters, because you're right, it does add that additional layer of complexity to a brand new system that we were trying to roll out. Again, it was something that was we were pressed to do in negotiations. But I think that what we tried to do and what we will try to do if this moves forward next year is we tried to respect the fact that charters are sort of a unique animal. They do currently have existing requirements for how teachers are to be assigned in statute. And so in our bill, we didn't try to sort of recreate the wheel. We referenced those existing laws. So teachers in a charter school are required to hold an appropriate, an equivalent credential to what a public school teacher would have to have if they are in a core assignment or a college prep assignment. And so, it's a narrower band of assignments, whereas a traditional public school teacher, it doesn't matter what assignment you are in, you have to be appropriately credentialed. And so we tried to respect that, but you're right, it does add a lot of complexity. And one of our regrets was because this happened sort of later in the process and then the bill almost immediately died, is we had only had sort of one or two initial discussions with some representatives of the charter school community. And so if we do revive this project next year, they will be included in our discussions just like we've included the other stakeholders, because we certainly don't want to go ahead and, sort of add to the burden of their lives. Oversight needs to be effective, and it needs to be, done with the input of the folks that you're taking a look at, so that they, have input into what's practical and what's realistic. So.
Thank you, Chair Darling-Hammond.
I just wanted to note that the point about grants and service scholarships and forgivable loans has come up over and over again. It's something that when we at the CTC did a survey of institutions, it was the number one thing that came up as a solution strategy. There was a survey of the public. It was the number one thing brought up by members of the public as a solution strategy. We do have a little bit of that it has been proposed by the legislature a few times, the idea of service scholarships, forgivable loans. They're not easily or automatically Prop 98 eligible, so it has not progressed, but it's an idea that is very important. We used to have the Apple loans, we used to have the governor's fellowships, but we do have the possibility for some inroads on that in the special education space with the $50 million in local initiatives that the CTC will be asked to organize and regulate. And districts can, or LEAs or counties, whatever way that LEAs are the recipients, could propose to do loan repayment or other strategies to offset student debt. So we'll be looking forward to hearing from Mary and the team soon about how that piece of the puzzle might get at least partially addressed in the work that's going forward.
One thing to that, I think those of you in higher education might want to be thinking about this. If you've developed as part of the integrated undergraduate teacher preparation program that was funded previously, there were 41 grants that went out. I think 21 of them indicated they were going to be creating undergraduate pathways in special education. And it seems to me like there's an opportunity to look at these local solutions grants in special education and those newly coming online programs in undergraduate special ed teacher prep to create an incentive to enroll people in those programs and to help them get their credential and have, an employer who's very interested in hiring them on the other side. So this is a good time to start looking at that and thinking about how your programs in these areas might begin to help with advertising and connecting with the LEAs.
Go ahead.
Just a quick comment and question. First, thank you, Commissioner Renaud-Shire, for including and pushing the private nonprofits in SB 577. Oh, I appreciate that. And a question about 3048. You said that there was one part that was a building block that you're working on that is approved with connecting CDE data with CTC data. Is that something that's going to be useful for preparation programs and linking where our graduates are being placed so that we can utilize that for accreditation purposes?
Yes. I don't have the exact language in front of me. But it does allow us to use that data that we're getting from CDE a little bit more broadly to look at the teaching workforce as part of our mission. So
we're working on that.
I'll just add that in talking about grants and looking at Assembly Bill 2186, the STEM teacher grant program. That really targets higher education, or higher as far as high school, junior high and high school education. But what would really be neat to see for elementary school, because that's where the excitement for those areas begins, is to have some sort of maybe some stakeholders work with somebody to write a bill that has something to do with offering grants for elementary school teachers who are interested in participating in some sort of educational piece for themselves, so that they can go into their classrooms and start that excitement for those STEM areas young with both their boys and their girls. I know a couple of districts in my area, they have one program happening where it was free for middle school girls to go, a summer program through UCSC, I think. That was really neat to see. But I used to participate in the Silicon Valley Math Initiative, which was so powerful for me as a second grade teacher to bring those different types of mathematical learning strategies into my classroom and really excite my students. So while we always look at STEM, when we're talking about credential areas, that's going to be, single subject, middle school and high school. And by that point, you might have already passed that excitement that some other kids could get if they were introduced to it earlier on. So just a thought for all you stakeholders out there. Any other commissioners? All right. This is an information item. No action is needed. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaks. And this concludes the business before the Legislative Committee. The committee is now adjourned.
And with that, I will now recess the general session. Members of the commission will go into closed session. The general session will reconvene at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.